That's a pretty good answer. I like how you said the word method. It's definitely a method. I don't know if it's exactly a method to get to what is the case, though. I think that's a little misleading. Although I'm not completely disagreeing with you, I think the method might be more, and this is a bit controversial. Well, this is really controversial of me to say, not a popular opinion. But I think the method of logic has a little more to do with like emotional stability. Not removing your emotions, but like an ability to empathize with your opposition. It's like a method for understanding your opposition, something like that. What up, though?
What up, man?
How's it going?
It's going all right.
I don't think we've ever talked before, although it seems like you followed me, I followed you back. Have we ever had a conversation before?
I don't think so.
Word.
So, I mean, logic to me is things you see and things you experience. You create your own logic. It's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So, I'll explain it to you this way. So, knowledge, I can read up every book about buying a used car, right? I can read up and I'll have all the knowledge. And then I sit down and the dealer that I'm buying the car from has wisdom. And he still tricks me into overpaying for that car. Now I gain that wisdom. So I'm like, yo, he forgave me. He finagled me. Whatever word you want to use. He tricked me into overpaying for this car. Now I gain that wisdom. It's not going to happen a second time. So logic is the simple things you see and you experience for yourself. And logically, I know that if I'm trying to get a box off a top shelf and there's another box on top, I can't pull that bottom box without that top one either coming down or pushing it back as I pull the bottom box out. That's just common logic. That's logic. It's logical. If I pull that bottom box, the top one's coming with it. If I push that top one away as I'm pulling the bottom one, then it's going to stay where it is. And then I can put that one on top of it. Either way,
Mm-hmm. I
it's
like
just
it. I like
logic.
everything you said there. I like everything you said there. I just want to push back on one thing. Do you see in yourself, even through when you make an observation, perhaps, times when you're rational and times when you're not rational?
Sure, I can argue with myself.
Yeah, like
Sure.
or be
Listen, you're talking to somebody who believes the world is flat because of logic, because of observation. Observatory, we're flat. My own observation, there is nothing that I have ever observed in my life that says we're heliocentric. Doesn't exist. Nope. 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 Water takes the shape of its container. Pretty simple logic. Pretty simple logic. Pretty simple. That's the simplest of logic, honestly. If I pour water into
okay.
it,
I just want to focus a little bit on this idea of like observations. My point is kind of like there's a difference
that's the
between when it
observation. That's why I wrote
but
a
there's a
flat through my own
th-
observations, my own
but but
logic.
but all I'm trying to say is there seems to be a difference between when I make like a rational observation versus an irrational one. Like I can, right? Like throughout my day, I'm trying to be rational. Sometimes I make observations that seem to be irrational, not just because they're wrong, but also because like maybe I'm irritated or impatient, right? Or like I'm viewing things with a bit of a filter through my day, right? I'm not seeing things clearly, that kind of thing. Are you still there? Trippy. Yeah. What's up, man?
Yo, sup, sup, sup. Oh,
Oh, What up, dude? How's it going tonight?
Yep.
Had interesting conversations. No, actually, actually,
Always.
actually, to basically sum up the live I did, the majority of it is basically what happens when you put an atheist, a Muslim, and a Christian in a bar. That's literally what my live. That was literally what my live was for the majority. And then a pagan atheist ended up joining into the fray. It was pretty funny. Oh,
Man, sometimes I get perplexed by like people's labels and then the patterns that I see. Like sometimes the people who label themselves atheists could be like some of the most spiritual people I know, and then like vice versa, some of the most religious thinkers I know are like very surface level, non-deep, or whatever. It seems like sometimes these self-labels almost are antithesis to what we project what we want to be, but often we're like different than what we label ourselves, I think.
true. Um, I got it.
But yeah, man,
So,
I hope you're doing well. I feel like I haven't had a conversation with you for a bit. Did you take some time
yeah,
off TikTok for
yeah,
a while?
yeah. I
Oh,
I
word.
took a time off. I decided to take a break from the insanity on this app. Um, it recalibrated my emotions. So I had to go through some shit mentally.
You mean this app kind of recalibrated it?
Okay, so basically, I never had anger, or I never really opened up to people a lot, until I joined conversations on this app. So when I came off it, I just realized how quiet my life is, and then that affected me, and then, yeah, so, yeah, I'm
I can
doing
totally
way
relate to
better.
that.
Yeah, but.
I can totally relate to that, man. Scrimba, jump in anytime. Kay in the comments, Orange Pill is being convinced of Bitcoin.
What? I don't know what that is.
Oh, no, sorry. Kay in the comments asked, what is Orange Pill? And I'm just answering them. But I'm just telling you as well. You jump in anytime.
Oh, yeah. I can start off by answering the question on screen. When you're talking about logic, do you mean it in like the philosophical sense, or?
Well, I have my own understanding of it, but that seems to be kind of controversial or like proprietary when I try to tell people what I think logic is. So I'm more actually just testing the waters and kind of getting other people's ideas of what it is. I've had a spectrum of answers all the way from a layman to an academic's answer to this. So it's not really any judgment. It's more just I'm curious what you think or like what your interpretation or, kind of how to
Well,
articulate it.
as far as I know, logic when you're using it in the academic sense is just basically codification of language into like a deductive system, which has like basically two parts: the semantics and the syntax. So,
Yep, love the answer. I'd love to get bogged down into this word deduction a little bit, especially related to syntax and like how we basically, if you understand the sentence you just said, I'm curious about like whether or not the syntax is related to a method. Is there something to be said? Are we saying like that there's something to be said about the syntax being related to like a methodology, you know?
well, the syntax is just a formal language system that we use. Like, for example, if I say that um, we usually represent, like, let's say a proposition as P. So, usually when we say, like, for example, there's the there's the laws of logic in which, like, you say that the law of non-contradiction, like, proposition cannot be true and not true at the same time. So the way how you would write the syntax of that would simply just be p and not p, is not possible. uh, so just just that's what syntax means, and semantics is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
uh,
Okay,
semantics is just basically the content of the proposition you're putting forward.
totally, totally. Yeah, you've outlined it great, man. I'm curious though because the syntax relates to like the form, right? The form of the argument. Like, there's all these inference rules that you can follow to
That's
pro.
semant. Um, oh yeah. That's syntax. Yeah.
Yeah, that's syntax because like you even used a great example of forming the variables p and q, right, as the propositions,
Yeah.
alleviating any semantics and just showing the form. In your case, p and not p is not possible.
Yeah.
So, but we could have another form like if p then q, p therefore q. That's modus ponens. There's tons of
Yeah.
different forms, right? And so, okay, so now that we're here, sorry, pardon. Um, I ponder the utility of the syntax in both its, well, I'm going to be careful with how I say this, be charitable with how you interpret with what I'm about to say, but basically, it demands a certain level of humility. The codification of language when it comes to syntax seems to be harnessing validity. Validity being this ability to check our premises.
Yeah, like yeah, that's so a prime example is like that's the difference between a valid argument and a sound argument. Like I can make a valid argument by saying, well, premise something like premise 1, my coat is furry, premise 2, my dog is furry, conclusion, my dog is a coat.
Right, and that's
But that's a
valid.
valid argument. It's not a
Yes.
sound argument. So
Hmm. Hmm.
um
But relate this to, okay, so see how academically this seems kind of, well, validity seems somewhat redundant in the sense that it doesn't have much to say about the substance of the propositions, right? But
yeah.
it does, and this is my point, it does seem to have implications in how we approach coding language through something like, and this is again where I'm reaching for words, it's a bit ineffable. It's hard to describe what I'm talking about here. But the syntax seems to demand something like falsifiability, humility, attestability, verifiability. So, in other words, it protects us from dogma. It seems like logic, the syntax of logic, protects us from dogmatic reasoning, right? Just making assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That
would. Yeah, I would agree with that.
that is a very particular methodology that even, and this is what I observe, even if someone deeply understands logic, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've adopted the method of being, you know, scientific in their approach. Just because someone could outline the laws of logic or memorize some inference rules, adopting the method of being falsifiable or is actually quite difficult because it demands this like removal of our emotions and an ability to really abstractly highlight our assumptions, which is like seems to be kind of like an emotional roller coaster for most people. I
Well,
don't know if you see that.
yeah, I've been in a couple of theistic debates, and a lot of times, like they'll say that, well, well, I can disprove atheism. Okay, that's fine, but you're still not proving that there exists a God, right? For example, like the very basic example of logic that I give people is that if I've parked my car outside, and after 1 hour I come out and see that my car is wet, I can't automatically just assume that it rained. You would have to give me like valid reasoning or like sufficient enough justifications or motivations for me to believe or to infer that my car being wet is because of it raining. Uh,
Yes, yes. So here's the tension I want to point out, though. It seems like there's two methods kind of here being confused. Like rationality gets us to a method of deduction, like you said. But I don't know if the method of deduction specifically, and again related to syntax, can get us to any final conclusion. It seems like all the conclusions are going to be tentative or at least limited, right? And to the degree that we can like highlight the limit of our terms or like bound our assumptions, right? Maybe we can deduce some, basically rather than truth claim, we're going to deduce a limit of what is like maybe not possible, or at least like, this is again where I'm kind of searching for terms here, because all right, deductions are always certain, but depending on the premises. So even a deduction is tentative in practical language. So it seems like when you come out and observe the car, right, there's two things that happen. You're trying to figure out what the hell happened to your car, right? And who knows, maybe if someone stole it, you might never find out, right? You might have to call the insurance company and literally be like, I think my car got stolen. I have no idea what happened to it, honestly. But then there's this other part where when you walk out, maybe you're with your girlfriend or your friend, and you start arguing with them about what happened through the emotional turmoil of having your car towed or stolen or whatever. You're searching rampantly for the answer, and in that process, there's a method for basically, again, actively deducing and stripping away the thoughts that are like harming you, your assumptions. So even though when you don't know the answer, there's still this method, logic, which provides an avenue or a vehicle to remain emotionally stable enough, at least, to communicate with those around you, who might disagree with you, who might have other information to provide you. You have to stay level headed. Maybe your girlfriend has a suggestion that you haven't thought of, right? And for you to neglect it and be like, no, that's stupid. It wasn't towed. Someone stole my car. In the end, probably you got towed, right? So it's this weird, like I'm trying to say, yes, we're tempted to get to the truth through logic, but I don't know if that's quite the method. I think the method of logic basically provides us a vehicle during the unease of uncertainty to remain calm and empathetic towards our opposition.
Well, I just take logic to be like when so logic, I take it primarily to be a deductive system, and in a deductive system I feel that it's more of probabilistic than deterministic, right? Like even if I say that like if I make the premise for like for the car example, like if I go out and say, well, my car, I'm seeing that my car is wet. I looked at the weather channel, and it was supposed to rain. I'm looking at the clouds. And I'm seeing black clouds. So it's a high probability that my car being wet was because it just rained, right? So even then, I can make like a deterministic claim by saying that because of the two previous premises, it is the case that it rained. That's why my car is wet. So
Okay. How would you, I'm going to follow you because I'm loving this discussion and I appreciate your time and your feedback here. How would you parse out, and this isn't to like test you, if you don't know, I don't care, the difference between induction and deduction?
well, deduction is just simply based on like a set of premises that you come to a logical conclusion, and it's telling you something more about your like when we talk about a deductive inference, we're talking about basically something that tells you more about how your mind works, right? You're basically saying that like it's more psychological. Like a deductive reasoning is the psychological process of drawing an inference, right? By looking at a set of premises. That's what I would. Sorry, excuse me. That's how I would just define deductive reasoning to be.
Okay, I wouldn't disagree with you completely. I just would like, just for clarity, the way I understand it is that induction is based on some sort of observation. Deduction is, like you kind of said, based on your just psychology, you could sit in an armchair and reason with just your brain deductively, with your eyes
Yes.
closed, right,
Yes.
doing math. But when you go out into the world and you make measurements and observations, these are inductive inferences. That's how I understand the difference.
Well, inductive reasoning is more so like a variety of like methods of reasoning, uh, in which the conclusion of the argument like is supported not with like deductive certainty, but with some degree of like um, uh, like it's basically you're using different methodologies to prove something, right? And you're saying that I'm making an inductive case.
Yes, and what I'm saying is that that method, at least how I differentiate it, is based on observation. One, induction,
Yes,
right?
yeah. In inductive, it's like
Of
certain.
course, there's tons of methodologies within observation, scientific measurement, right? We could go through the plethora of different strategies of induction, but the thing that differentiates induction from deduction would be this observational element. Deduction requires no observations.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you one more question. And I get a lot of pushback on this point, but for me, these words are connected. If I asked you, when I deduce or deduct money from your bank account, what does that mean to you?
Well, in that particular statement, it's just you telling that you're using deduction as just like in a mathematical sense. You're just saying that you're
Like
subtracting.
subtraction. Yeah,
Yeah,
subtraction.
you're subtracting like a certain amount from your
Yes.
net savings
Now,
account.
now, what I would say here is that similar to that metaphor, I know that financially the term is used differently, but if we were to build up a theorem, right, from the ground up using our observations and our inferences, that would be an inductive argument. But if we were to take an assumption and then break it down into all of its parts and limitations, I view that as deductive. So rather than building a sculpture up using the material, we're shaving what's not true away to expose the truth. So deduction is this method, again, not of clinging to our assumptions and building up a theorem like induction. What it is we start with a very crude rock and shave away slowly but surely what we know is not true, and maybe slowly but surely the image reveals itself. You see?
Okay, I mean it's I think so. What you're basically saying is that you're just like eliminating the least likely outcome.
Well, it's a little more than that because this process of deduction has reoriented my method in daily life practically all around.
Well, I don't.
When I talk to my loved ones, right, rather than speaking dogmatically about what I know, I approach the conversation from this willingness to excavate my own assumptions, a willingness to be wrong, a willingness, again, to excavate and dig into my own limitations of knowledge, rather than projecting what I do know as certain, right, in a dogmatic, non conversational way that seems to be like um, escalating.
So, I mean, forgive me if I'm like misrepresenting your point, but the way how you describe that, like you have like a set of observations, and you keep like removing the least likely observation to finally come to the correct
Well,
conclusion.
there doesn't need to be an observation. With deduction, like for instance, the car being stolen is an interesting one because we walk out with our girlfriend, right? The car's gone. You are making the observation that the car's gone, but the problem is really that you have limited data. You don't know where the car is gone. So no observation. You're rapidly looking around for more data. You're looking at your girlfriend. You're thinking, who can I call to find my car? No observation you can make in that moment is going to clarify the truth about where your car is. So now You're in a whole nother state of mind, right?
Well, that
And
just sounds like
go ahead.
abductive. That just sounds like abductive reasoning.
Well, there's no percentile. There's no you want to prescribe this like probability aspect. I'm saying I'm removing the probability entirely with deduction, right? Abduction, I would agree, uses probability, but deduction, not so much. Because there's no probability data to be observed. Observation isn't even necessary for the deductive method. So it makes me ponder, what is the utility of the deductive method? If there's no observation involved, it seems almost anti-scientific. It's like, wait, there's this whole method of logic called deduction, which doesn't even require an observation. Well, what does it require? And after pondering on this, it seems as though it requires a level head of humility. It requires like more than what we can touch and observe. It's something spiritual in us, right, that demands what you said at the very start, this ability to codify language, but not simply codify it in a way that's true, codify it in a way that is like honest. I'm sorry that if you left, if I was boring you or I was like talking at you there. That's disappointing. I thought we were having a really good conversation. Maybe he just lost connection. Anyone else who's been hearing what I'm saying though, I would love pushback on this. And the Fool's Throne, I don't know where you're at with this. No pressure to, talk if you're just chilling or whatever. But now you're the only one up here.
Um, I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's like unscientific. I just think it's just at least with the deductive logic, it's just a way to keep ourselves from fall into confirmation bias, whatever. But I
You're
do
right.
agree. But I do agree with you that there's a level of emotions that it comes from without logic. So I mostly agree with you. I just don't think I would just call it unscientific. That's probably my only.
No, no, I would agree with you. I was trying to, I guess, relieve a bit of my own bias there. Like, I thought when I was younger and less educated, science was this like hard material of observation-based data collecting method. But when I understand deduction a little more, I'm like, oh, this is kind of brinking on the edges of what I earlier assumed science was limited to. It appears, though, that science is actually grounded in a much deeper realm than purely materialism, purely our observations. Logic does seem to be grounded in something like what you said, like whatever. It's very hard. This is where it's funny. Describing it requires logic, right? So
Mhm.
we're trying to find words to describe the ineffability of what it is that we're actually searching for. This method's guiding us towards the truth or whatever, and we aren't there yet. So it's like every attempt I say, like, oh, we have to be honest, or oh, we have to be curious or patient. It's like none of those words are really going to capture what the method actually is, because it's something like in us, deep in our heart, and like truth and honesty is not really a describable thing. It's like deep in us.
I wonder if there's like a philosophy of science that actually explore this.
Well, I've had a lot of different references that have impacted my thinking. I mean, mainly Nassim Taleb. Nassim Taleb's a financial advisor and an economist, but his book, like Black Swan or Fooled by Randomness, goes deep into logic and the method of deduction being like a spiritual thing. But he doesn't talk about it religiously like that. It's not like he's using the historicity of the Bible or anything to support his claims. He's talking somewhat like I am. He's like using data to support his claims in a way, or like I don't really know how. Again, he's like kind of just capturing the wisdom of old wives' tales in a way that's rational.
Um, I did look this up on my AI, so like you can take this with a grain of salt. But where was it? Uh, oh, okay. In the philosophy of science, emotions are often considered part of the context of discovery rather than the context of justification. meaning they influence how scientists arrive at hypotheses, but are not typically seen as part of the formal logic validation. However, some philosophers argue that emotions can enhance reasoning by guiding intention, shaping epistemic values, and even improving reliability in belief formation. Biasing premises, enhancing pattern recognition, suppressing rational deliberation. Oh, hold up. Intense emotions such as fear or anger can override logical reasoning, leading to impulsive conclusions. That's
Okay, there's something here about that I want to say about like the ability to empathize, right? Like I'm not completely convinced that logic is this thing of like removing your emotions. However, I do think that in order to fully empathize with like your opposition, you may need to be able to like step outside of your own emotions. It's not about like neglecting your emotions. It's almost the opposite. It's like being so emotionally stable that you can unbiasedly empathize.
mm, I wouldn't say unbiased. I would probably say taking a step back from your own emotions instead of adding
Right.
to the situation.
Right. Right.
You can't
Eh,
remove bias, unfortunately.
You're right. You're right. But to the degree you're at least like attempting to, or like, yeah,
You're
like,
attempt you're
you're
attempting
right.
to understand. Right. Yeah.
You're right. Right. And so, yeah, I would say that the logical method empowers one to do that. It's not about, oh, I'm going to be so unemotional that I just think like a robot. It's like the ultimate tool to empower one to be, again, be able to like love and empathize someone who disagrees, who doesn't see the world the way that you do, who thinks, who may even be kind of like your enemy, who thinks you're an idiot, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Aman, feel free to jump in anytime, bro.
I know, I'm just listening. This whole thing is just getting over my head. I just want to enjoy the conversation until I'm able to say something useful.
Okay. No pressure, dog. No
Just
pressure.
like the whole logic thing and emotion thing, and like I just feel there's even more complicated stuff to it. Like the environmental factors, what you know to be true. What do you think is what do you think is fair? It's relative. What someone else think is logically fair might be different from what somebody else think is logically fair. So it's that subjectivity I think affects everybody's individual logic in a way. There's no one true logic that this is what it is. Except you want to talk about mathematics that we have definitive rules. But if you just talk about like logic in the sense of not mathematical logic, I don't know. It's that's why I'm still listening to know where the direction you guys are going with this.
I like everything you said there, man. It's a broad topic for
It
sure.
is.
There's so much to cover, and I like how you tied in kind of both sides of it. Gorg, obviously, feel free to jump in anytime as well. No pressure though.
Yeah, I was just like, I wanted to comment on you were talking about like keeping your emotions out of like discussions and stuff, and it's just like reminding me of DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, and this thing called Wise Mind. I'm like going through this workbook I have trying to find the chapter on Wise Mind, but if I remember it correctly, it's talking about how like we have like this reasoning, this like we have this two different reasoning parts of our
Like
minds.
modes, or like
Yeah,
capacity. Yeah.
yeah, we've got like a emotional side and a reasoning. I don't know. I have to find it. Hang on, I forget. It's been a long time.
No, this sounds cool. This sounds
Host,
cool.
is that your picture? Is that Logic Troll?
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea, bro. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the troll under the bridge and like trolls online, how trolling, what is a good troll? And like, it's crazy how trolling, some of the best memes and best trolls seem to be really rational, logical, right? They capture both sides of the argument and put both polarized ends at each other's throat. They make either ends of the bridge fight against each other, and the troll just sits under the bridge, right? And causes disruption through his like memes or his trolls. There's a good story there somehow that I'm not quite know I don't know yet.
That's funny.
I like that
Nice
you
one, bro.
appreciate it, bro.
Nice
Hell
one,
yeah.
bro. Yeah.
But mainly, man, what I've been thinking about is like, especially on TikTok, I see so many like arguments and debates and people getting bogged down in like toxic, argumentative behavior. And for me, logic has empowered me again to be like more patient and curious with my loved ones in my everyday life.
Hmm.
So, so it's interesting to see logic be leveraged as like a weapon rather than it adopted as a skill set for like love and empathy, patience, curiosity, wisdom, those kinds of things. Because in my everyday life, learning about logic has really humbled me. It hasn't made me confident, arrogant, certain, or like, right? It's, if anything, learning about logic has taught me to be like more humble.
Yeah, what's your source for this learning? Is it
I
like
have I have a lot
philosophy
of
or?
I have a lot of different ones. I said Nassim Taleb is probably my most powerful reference, though. Nassim Taleb. He
Where
wrote
is
he
he
wrote
from?
he wrote a lot of books. You know what? I don't know where he's from originally. I think he lives in America, but he could be in Europe somewhere. Actually, I think he's from Iran originally.
Yeah, the
Um,
name sounds Middle Eastern. Or
Iranian. Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure he's Iranian originally, but I think now he like lives in the States, or I don't know. He's very rich, so he has. I'm sure he lives in many different countries. But he has several good books. But one book called "Fooled by Randomness" and another book called "Black Swan." Those were really impactful on my thinking.
yeah, can you? I followed you. Try to see if you can. I would like to read some of those.
Cool, man.
Because I'm a religious person and I get my own like logic based on religious. I dive into it, but I would like to see other people's perspective to see and kind of compare and contrast. Um,
Cool, man. That's
yeah.
so cool. I followed you too, and I will send you some.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
He's Eastern Orthodox, so he's a religious man, but none of his books reference like the Bible or anything.
Makes sense.
He doesn't talk about religion at all.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Uh,
there's a book like that by somebody else. I think I need to start going into this. I want to start to study philosophy for real. Like I just feel there's a lot of knowledge out there that we don't have. That if we had them, it probably would have given us a broader scope of understanding things. And that's why I jump on all these lives. I want to tap from you guys, the troll and the non-troll.
you're such a humorous, like you have a good sense of humor, man. I sense that you're a good person in real life, bro.
Oh, thank you. You just you make me better than I am when you say that. But thank you.
Man, partly coming onto these toxic panels where everyone's arguing with each other does require a method of like resilience.
Hmm.
It's like entering a cage with a bunch of fighters or something, right? Like if you come to TikTok thinking you're gonna go unscathed, then you're mentally unprepared because
Mm-hmm.
you have to
Mm-hmm.
be ready for the battle.
Of course.
You have to have your armor on. People will throw stones when
Mm-hmm.
you're yeah.
Gorgon, are you? Did you find what you want to? Would you want to keep talking? Did you find what you were looking for, Gorgon? Is it Gorgon?
Gorgonzola. Yeah. Yeah, I found the chapter about Wise Mind and it's interesting. I'm like reading about it and learning it all over again. But I was pretty close to what I was talking about. It's talking about how like there's like the rational thoughts and then there's the emotion driven thoughts. And um Logic Troll, you're saying like you use logic as your anchor to remain rational and not just be led by your emotions. But I want to suggest how important it is to use both sides at the same time. Um, I don't
Yes. Yes, I would agree. Okay, so I hope I didn't cut you off because if you have more to say, feel free to say it.
just that wise mind, the whole concept is using reasoning and emotion at the same time. Wise mind is like both together. If you're like just
Yes.
reasoning, you're missing part of the puzzle. And if you're just using emotion, you're missing part of the puzzle. You got to use the
Yes.
wise mind.
Yes. Yes, you're nailing it. You're nailing it. There's a component here which is like the linguistic component. Like, let's say I'm struggling with my own emotions, but I haven't really like articulated those emotions into thoughts or like arguments or sentences yet. The process of thinking, right, about your emotions requires this a step of codifying language. So, to work in harmony with one's own emotions, we have to be aware of how close we are to victimizing ourselves to our linguistic behavior. Our language takes control of us if we're not aware of its disposition on our psychology. It's like a fog over our emotions, right? If we're not willing to discard the rational component, we won't ever be in touch with our emotions. We'll forever be searching for a sentence or an argument to describe the way we feel. And then we'll want affirmation from others to recognize how we feel. Forever searching for that. And no one will ever really be able to fully give you that, right? Because language is limited. So yeah, you bring up a really deep part here, which is I think emotion comes first. Then the problem is ridding ourselves of this linguistic behavior that is so toxic, if not kept at bay, right? The the non-emotional approach to language is demanded in the syntax of logic, not because we want to be robots, but because the moment we use words, if we don't use them properly, we become the victims of the sentences. Our thoughts become self-harm objects. You know? I don't know if anyone has pushback or has other ideas on that. I love what you said there, Gorg. For sure. Absolutely. I think you're making the point about this tether that academically minded and smart people want to make, which is that if they only think rationally, they don't have to be responsible for their emotions, you know? And that is the absolute toxic behavior of dogmatic thinking, whether you're religious or academic, doesn't really matter. Like grounding your emotions is the first step to rational thinking. What up, Miriam? Gang.
السلام
What up,
عليكم
though?
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
How's it going tonight?
السلام عليكم أخي.
I
Oh,
don't think she speaks English.
yeah, she doesn't. I think she followed me here. She usually comes on some of my lives. She's probably from Syria, one of these countries that look for help. So,
Amazing.
yeah,
Amazing.
they are living in tents and in terrible situations. So sometimes they jump on this live, they speak Arabic.
Yeah, I've seen that before. It's crazy that they could get on TikTok in such dire situations. What a dystopian world we live in, hey?
Yep.
To be in the epitome of poverty and then also online next to someone in affluence. Dystopia. Amazing. So, I guess a lot of my thoughts here come from my exposure to poverty. I grew up fairly affluent and spoiled, but now I live in the grunge. And so the city has definitely exposed me to my peers and my colleagues and my friends and whatever, my loved ones. I don't know. It's definitely exposed me to the reality. Whoa, I'm getting flagged. That's crazy. Huh. Should I restart the live?
Oh, did they say anything? Why are you getting flagged? That's weird.
Yeah, I just got flagged for inappropriate something something. I don't know. Should I be good? I guess I'll probably be good. It just said age restricted content.
Yeah, it just means that you won't be able to hit the For You page, so you won't get like high number of viewers.
All right, fuck it. As long as I'm not getting like taken down, I don't care. It's probably good that this isn't an all ages live. I didn't really mean to. It's annoying because whenever I set that setting of not for all ages, every time I start the live, I have to re-toggle that setting, and I often forget. I wish that setting would just maintain because I don't really mean for this to be like an all ages live. Also, very odd how TikTok's like why even give access to live if they're gonna age restrict shit? It's just like so confusing. It's like are underage kids allowed to use this app or not? Like what the fuck? And why is it my responsibility?
I think that people under the age of 18 are allowed to be viewing TikTok lives, but they're not allowed to participate in the
Right. Yeah, you can't come up on the panel, yeah. But like in all honesty, like live access should probably just be restricted entirely to underage viewers, you know? Like why even give the liability? Yeah, maybe most lives that are age restricted are whatever, but it's just so easy for them not to be kid friendly that like why even give? Or a slip up could happen so easily, or the comments
Mm-hmm.
even too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like why even give underage kids access to that shit?
I know. I think that's why you could just restrict the whole life to the age you want, rather than.
Bro, I would tell you right now, if I had a kid, especially any kid under 10, there's no way they had TikTok on their phone. There's no way I'd let them have TikTok.
Mhm.
Like fuck that. I can't even deal with TikTok, dude.
Yep. You can drive a grown up nuts.
Yeah, for real. For real.
So I have so today I don't know if it was on your live when Con came earlier and he was talking about the trolley argument about morality, something about a trolley.
Yeah, the Charlie problem. Who was it? Sorry, I missed the name.
I think it was Con. His name was Con, CON.
I don't know. I don't think I know who that is.
Yeah, so we were talking about something about morality.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the Charlie problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't. So it was my first time hearing it. Because I didn't grow up here, so my basic education wasn't here. In fact, my elementary, high school, my first degree was all in Africa. I only came here for my PhD in physics. So,
Where in Africa?
Nigeria.
Cool, man. Did you get into the religious stuff with him previous to the Charlie problem, or was the Charlie problem just immediately the topic?
Yes, so no, so we're talking about religious stuff. And
I figured.
and then he came in and started saying, okay, um, do you know no, he started with the whole concept before he even told me it was a trolley problem. What are you gonna do if a train is just gonna unalive 5 people, or you could pull a
Yeah.
something and then it goes to unalive 1 person? That who would you choose? I'm like, it depends. He said, okay, just choose. What do you mean it depends? I said, okay, I'll choose to unalive 1 person than to unalive 5 people. And he's like, okay, what if those 5 people are 5 Hitlers? What are you gonna do? I'm like, no, you are giving more information. I'm like, you didn't give me this information before, but you want to hold me responsible for letting 5 Hitlers leave. It doesn't make any sense. Like,
Did this come from you saying something like you believe in objective morality, or you believe
yes.
more?
So we're all talking about the logic of God as objective and other things. So, and he just came, this is total nonsense. You guys, he just kept swearing and swearing and cussing and cussing. And that was what he brought it. I'm like, everything you say, I have an answer for. Just because I unalived one person who was probably a good person, and I let five Hitlers to leave, you cannot use my ignorance. Even if I go to court of law, I'm still going to be hailed a hero because I try to save five people. If I knew that those five people were Hitler and I still did that, yes, now you can hold me accountable. So if you withhold that information from me, or out of my own ignorance, I did not know, there's no how you can blame me or say I'm a murderer for letting five Hitlers leave.
Yes. Are you familiar with the word skepticism?
And I don't know if there's a context you are asking, or if it's just to be skeptic. Like,
Okay.
can you tell me?
I just find that you can parse out immediately who are the types that are skeptically minded, right? If they ask you, what are your morals? And you try to explain, well, I believe in God, or I believe in a virtue ethic or something. And then they say, well, what about the trolley problem? What way would you choose? And you say, well, I think I would choose the lane with one person, not five, right? And then they say, oh, but the five people, right? And they keep throwing these scenarios. That is skepticism, right? They're doubting everything you say. They're gonna doubt, and they're not really willing to put forward their own beliefs and or recognize. This is the problem with skepticism often. Not a true skeptic, not like an academic skeptic, but like a layman who's skeptically minded. They won't ever give you the benefit of the doubt. When I hear you say, I would choose the lane with one person rather than five, I think you're probably a good person. Like good job. Like that's the most
I mean,
intuitive
I told
thing.
him, I'm like, I'm not the one who started this train to go unalive people. I'm trying to save. I'm in a situation here where I'm like, you put me in a situation where a train is going to definitely unalive one or the other. I'm here to decide
Yes.
who to save. So I didn't say, hey, let's go unalive people train. Let's go. Like,
Yes.
what are you talking about? Like,
But
it
see,
doesn't even.
but see, we don't even have to get all the way to an example like the trolley problem. And Ryoman, welcome, bro. Jump in
Oh,
whenever
let's
you
not
feel.
go into that too much. Why I brought it up is, before I forget, is I wanted you see how you talked about logic and moral. I mean, what was the other thing you talked about? Logic, that we have to put together our emotions and logic, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to see if there is any philosophical example like the trolley problem to understand it. That was why I brought it up.
Right. Well, yeah, you could your ability to deductively reason through the problem is the issue, right? It's this lack of skepticism, your good intentions, your good faith. That's the that's the exercise, bro. That your willingness to admit, well, okay, now that it's five Schmittlers, that makes it a more difficult moral problem. Like I don't know, you're willing. The moment you get defensive and you think you know the absolute answer and you're unwilling to partake in the conversation, that's the moment you become a skeptic, really, or a nihilist to a degree, right? And you're unwilling to like hospitably approach the moral dilemma. In court, they're going to assess how rational you are. Isn't that funny? If you're dogmatic and defensive about the track you chose, well, I chose the track with five people because they're all murderers and they're all basically schmittlers. Well, the court is going to be very skeptical of your position. The court is going to say, wait, this guy chose the track with five people because he thinks they're all like, there's no proof. He kind of assumed like they were all kids. You know, there could be this whole component of the court who's going to judge you. It's going to judge your willingness to be wrong. Someone who comes to the table and crying, I had to choose. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to choose. I chose what I thought was right, and they're traumatized. The court's going to sympathize. The court is going to see that this person. Isn't it funny how their emotions are tied to their rationality?
Of course.
Being cold, being dismissive, being certain. None of those things show emotional intelligence. None of those things show honesty. None of those things show rationality. a willingness to be wrong, a willingness to admit fault, take responsibility. Those are stronger signs of a person who's thought through the true moral dilemma. So flip the moral dilemma on the skeptic and watch them crumble,
Hmm.
right? Good faith will always be appreciated from an audience like me watching you try to go through the moral dilemma than the person questioning you and adding on, oh, now they're all schmittlers, now the track is three ways, whatever they want to throw at you. I as the audience member, I appreciate you, right? The person honestly willing to go through the moral dilemma, not the person who's skeptical all the time and unwilling to give the benefit of the doubt and always right, always throwing another tragedy in the scenario. It's like it's
Oh, it was
unconversational.
even worse than that. The moment I said I didn't know about the trolley problem, the next question he asked was, "What's your highest level of education?"
Yeah, belittling you because you're unfamiliar with some TikTok. It's a TikTok trope. The trolley problem is a common philosophical example, but it's popular on TikTok. Dude, that's another just red flag, right? If for me as an honest interlocutor, if you didn't know about the trolley problem, bro, I would. There's no like, yeah, that actually that's so insulting, right? It's such a testament to their education, such a testament to their education, brother, right? It's actually sad that that would be a description because like for all I care, you could believe in a flat Earth, and I
Yeah,
would
he
still
said,
be I would still
yeah,
be hospitable.
I know. He said because I didn't know of the trolley problem, then he feels
It's disgusting.
yeah, he doesn't like I know nothing about morality if I don't know anything about the trolley problem. Like really, so I don't have morals because I don't know about the trolley problem.
Isn't it funny that I picked up on your good sense of humor immediately in this engagement? Like you have such a good sense of humor, and you're more. Yeah, bro. It's funny. Well again, bro. It's kind of sad. This is the level of thinking that I think is kind of a Western ideology. It's funny. It's funny that you do, you know, your education doesn't reside from a Western civilization. That's actually probably a testament to your difference of
And I
opinion.
told him, I'm like, I have a PhD in physics. I never took any
Oh yeah,
philosophy class.
classic.
And he's like, well, I have a master's in psychology and blah. I'm like, yeah, that's why you didn't say. Oh, if he had said, if I said when I said I didn't know the trouble, did you take any philosophy class before or no? If he has been more specific, like if you had taken a philosophy class or anything related, you should have known this. I didn't even go to high school in the US. My first degree was in Nigeria, so I don't even know your education or whatever you guys do here. You didn't put all those into consideration just because I don't know this trolley problem. You're asking what is my highest level of education. Then I turned around because I'm stubborn. I'm like, can you tell me what Newton's first law is? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, but so I can't have a conversation with you. At least they teach you that in high school. And he's like, well, I don't remember. I'm like, if you're gonna base so, what if I told you because you didn't know Newton's first law? Like it just doesn't add up.
Is
Like,
it for fun? Is it every reaction has an opposite and equal
that's what
reaction?
he no, that's the third one. That's the third law.
Ah, what's the first one?
That's
Fuck.
the one he said. He was like, for every
Fuck.
action is like equal. Nope, that's the third one.
What's the first one? What's the
The
first
first
one?
one, it's stated in many ways. It's the one that says everything remains at rest or motion except acted upon by an external
With by
force.
force,
Yes, that's
yes.
the first
Fuck.
one.
Ah, I should have known that. You got me
you're,
too.
you're good. It's not. It's not. It's
No, but see
nothing.
see how the same example through our conversation is a comical, lighthearted, educational, fun trope, whereas
Mhm.
with him it became this toxic
Yeah.
competition. Yeah, it's the same, but it was the same topic. It's like,
Mhm.
bro, real education looks like what we just did, right? It's just it's lighthearted, like
And I love it.
yeah, that's me
I've
too,
loved
right?
talking to you so far. Like it's
You
amazing.
too,
Let's not
bro.
forget Roman. Roman, do you have something to say? Sorry, we just carried away in
I
this whole.
agree. Good job.
Sorry, Roman.
Oh well, I was just sorry, I almost fell asleep there, but I was just curious on like what you guys thought logic were, or what your account of logic was.
Okay, for me, I'll just be really quick. I mean, I'm kind of looking for everyone else's opinion on the matter because I'm just interested generally on how others think about it, but I could give you my opinion. I think it's like a method for emotional stability and empathy and a willingness to communicate curiously and patiently. It basically informs me how to be a moral good person. That's for me, that's what logic is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess I can flesh out a little bit of my account then. I take it that logic, at least considering academic texts, I take it that logic is just going to be, or just going to be reduced down to syntactic orientation that guides epistemic conduct. So it's just going to be an epistemic norm.
Yeah, so you think it's like a claim to knowledge?
No, epistemic norms aren't necessarily claims
Oh,
to knowledge.
norm. I heard you wrong. I thought you said epistemic claim. An
No, I
epistemic
said,
norm. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I would basically agree with that. It's
Can you repeat that, Raymond? That was a little top of my head. I want to hear it again. It sounded really
Yeah, I
good.
said that I just take it that classical logic or propositional calculus can just be reduced down to some system of syntax, and that's just going to be an epistemic norm. The system of syntax is just going to guide epistemic conduct.
Yeah, yes. So I gotta ask you, what's your interpretation of those guidelines? And not in the I'm not trying to test you here, bro. In a s- do you think the syntax has any moral implications?
No, I don't think the syntax, or at least when we're talking about propositional calculus and when we talk about the syntax, I don't think the syntax makes any existential claims, neither do they make any moral claims.
So what do they demand? Do they have any kind of when you
Okay,
say
so
when you say they're
the more,
norms, they're
yeah,
a little
so,
more than that, right? Like what do they demand?
well, I mean, to say that they're a little more than that is just gonna kind of be a different. I mean, there's various other views that consider logic to be different. But when I say that these things are just reduced to a norm, that's just saying that yeah. So that's just saying that these things are more prescriptive than descriptive, right? They are things that give some sort of stipulations or principles to for the aim or pursuit for valid inferences or
Yes,
acceptable
yes.
inferences in the system.
Yes. Okay. So I want to quickly touch on things like fuzzy logic or paraconsistent logic. These concepts of logic that kind of go outside the norms, right?
Yeah, so under a deflationist view, or I mean, yeah, so
Yeah, deflate,
under
right? Where
well
truth is
under
some.
yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
under a deflationist view, all these logical system, all these other non-classical logical systems, because that's what those are, they're just going to be systems in which you can. They're also just going to be reduced to epistemic norms, and they're just systems that you can adopt.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. So, but I want to differentiate because this conversation is actually getting really interesting now. I want to differentiate a little bit between in your worldview why or what the adoption of those different formal systems may look like practically in our everyday life. Do you
I'm
mind if
not,
we kind of
yeah,
experiment with that?
we can talk about that, but I'm not too clear what the question is.
Well,
It sounds like
because I
you're
earlier
asking.
asked you about the moral implications, right?
Yeah, and I said that the syntax system doesn't concern anything.
Right, right. But you could agree that when we adopt something like outside of the norms of formal classical logic, like fuzzy logic or pair-consistent logic, that it appears as though it at least appears as though there's a different moral outcome or ethical outcome of those systems.
Well, with pair consistent logic and fuzzy logic just introduces this new degree of truth values. So like so they're so truth values aren't binary. They're not 0 and 1. There's
Yes.
actually degrees of truth values, and that's what it introduces. So I
Yes.
don't think that necessarily concerns anything ethical. And then with pair
Hmm.
consistent logic, I believe they just deny law of excluded middle.
Or
Above.
well, and perhaps even law of contradiction, right? They might even accept like
Yeah, they might be
right,
dialectic. Yeah.
right. Okay. So you're so um literate in this space, right? So this conversation is I really do appreciate this conversation. I hope if you're running short on time or whatever that we can continue in the future. This is an extended conversation that I would like to like not pressure us to finish right
Me
now, but
too. I want to continue this another time. It's a deep one.
it is, but I wanna kind of we can still like finish it somewhat, right? But I wanna.
Yeah, we can. I'm good on time right now. It's nighttime
Okay,
right.
well, I'll let you take the conversation where you want to take it from here, and I'm interested to know where you're gonna go with it. I could continue as well to drill home where I think the moral implications are, or if you would like to take it in a different direction, go ahead.
We can go there because otherwise I might just, if not, if we don't talk about the ethical stuff, then I may just consult you guys on, particular philosophical views you have.
Cool. Okay, cool. Okay, well, let's just stick to the syntax of classical logic and consider again how these implications prevail throughout sort of history. I think that rational thinking, right, has a falsifiability, a verifiability, a validity to it that enables at least emotional humility and emotional stability. Dogmatic thinking is not invited to the table. Would you agree with that?
Are you just saying like, I don't know. I kind of don't understand what you're saying there. So,
Okay.
I think I have an interpretation, but it seems like you're saying that, things that are solely derived from opinions on their own are things that are not concerned, at least when we're talking about, the system of rationality.
Somewhat, but there's a deeper point. In the history of turmoil, war, conflict, and cultural diversity, the method that has prevailed in united societies has been the rational one because of the syntax, not the substance, not the context, not the semantics, right? It the codification of language through the rational method allows us to understand other cultures and other languages. It demands that. To colonize through violence, right, is to misunderstand the opposition, which is actually a like limited war tactic, right? Colonization and assimilation of cultures demands a certain tolerance and understandability, right? The syntax of logic is a translation method so that when you come across a culture that doesn't agree with you, you can assimilate them or what's the word? Symbiotically, right? Appropriate each other's cultures, right? In an efficient manner, not through violence and hatred, but through love and peace and cooperation and collaboration and all the beautiful things of rational society.
Okay, well, I just want to get clear on the term here. What do you mean by rational? Because it seems like you're using it
Right,
more
right.
colloquially.
I want to. No, I know here, and that's a great pushback, bro. But I want to stick to the word syntax. Can
That's what
let's
it's
just
thinking.
study the syntax of logic and look at conditional reasoning, right? Like modus ponens, for instance, has this word if at the beginning of the syntax. If P then Q. Imagine formalizing all of your codifying, right? All of your language to that inference rule. It would demand you to be so humble in your approach because everything you say begins with an if clause. You can no longer make a dogmatic assertion. Now, I know I'm just referencing modus ponens and there's several other inference rules, but that's the most popular one, and I think it is one for a reason. And I think that codifying our language in a way that's conditional sets up criticism in an honest way that can be actually like scientifically observed and falsified. If we don't allow room for falsification, we run short of the scientific and rational method because we don't allow our opposition, our peers, those who disagree or want to criticize our theorems, We don't allow them at the table of discourse. Rationality demands this like tolerance for your opposition. It invites your opposition to the table. Your critics become your peers. You want them at the table. And through honest discourse, right, and rational thought, hopefully, and God's will, we can come together and solve these humanitarian problems, basically, right? Isn't that the end of all this? Isn't that the purpose? Isn't that the aim? Why do we get up in the morning, right? I hope I'm not rambling too much, but going back to the syntax, I hope you kind of see what I'm saying. I can't find, outside of formal inference rules, I can't find a way to formalize morality in a better way than thinking rationally.
I mean, I'm not sure. Well, I'm just not clear in the connection between. It's just not, or at least it might be on my part, but it's just not as transparent to me what the connection between rationality and morality is.
Well, let's say this. Let's say the whole time we had this discussion, I was just dogmatic. That's a good word. Do you know what dogma is?
Well, I think, or I believe it's typically denoted as whenever some individual or interlocutor is opinionated, very opinionated.
Right, and like drilling home certainty claims without, they're as presuppositional truths without really backing them up. And so you would mark that as a rational thinker, I'm assuming, you would mark that as a testament to my irrationality.
Having
that's
presuppositions? I don't think having presuppositions means you're irrational. No.
Okay, I agree with you there. You're right to be a little pedantic in that sense, but I'm making a further point. It's not just right that I'm making presuppositions. I'm making them in this way that's dogmatic. I'm being propagandistic. I'm not being charitable to you in your skepticism. I'm demanding you accept my presuppositions in a non-hospitable way. That's what dogma is. Oh, you don't believe in Jesus, right? You're going to hell. Dogma. That's the classic religious dogma, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, in your heart of hearts, you're right to be skeptical of those kinds of people. And you don't need English, and you don't need, well, you need a bit of logic, I'd say, but you don't need English to find those people. If you go to another country, you don't speak the language, you'll still be able to pick out the dogmatic people, maybe a little less efficiently than you can in English culture. But the signs of immorality are tethered to your awareness of logical thinking. You'll pick up, you are the one who picks up on someone who's dogmatic and irrational. An addict on the street, speaking in, tongues, or telling you to follow them because they have something to show, whatever. When your ears perk up and when you need to be like cautious of authority, especially in authority, right? Of authority presenting their authority as if you should just respect them because they have a badge or because they have credentials. That's irrational, right? That's authority. That's like pretty much verging on a like formal fallacy. Appealing to authority is not exactly rational, right? These kinds of patterns play out throughout history in the hero perspective of what a good person is. How could we disregard morality while not appreciating the rational thinkers in history who have stood up against the zeitgeist, right? Against the moral norms of the culture, and stood up for things like rational, open-minded thinking, right? Those are the things that make us, I think, make us like a practicing, disciplined, rational thinker.
Mm-hmm.
So the syntax is the main thing to focus on for someone like you. You're actually deep in this academically. So look at the syntax. Look at inference rules. What do they demand? If P, then Q. P and Q are variables on the propositions. They don't give us any context to the semantics. Perfect. So already we're at a state here of abstract thinking where we're eliminating semantics. If you can get to that point in your daily practice of life, where you're giving everyone the benefit of the doubt on every word that triggers you because you understand that semantics aren't the game, it's a game of syntax and validity, bro, you're 99% beating the game. Now the last percent becomes, doing that charitably to yourself. Harnessing these inference rules. Do not allow yourself to become the dogmatic monster that you view in other people. Remain rational. Give the benefit of the doubt to your loved ones, right? Be open to criticism. All those wonderful things. Give the benefit of the doubt to your girlfriend or to your boyfriend or to your lovers, right? Your cousins, your neighbors. Be charitable with your interpretations of other people's vocabulary and forgive them for trespassing against you. Those are all rational, like, morals.
Okay, well, I guess what I got from that, at least, is that you haven't really rendered a case in where it's necessarily like these things are necessarily going to be relied on things in a relationship. But I mean, I think I got the gist of it. You're essentially saying that these things can complement each other, which I mean I don't deny.
Well, can you provide me someone who's rationally deducing their thoughts while also being immoral? That's, I suppose, my skepticism of your position. Like, someone would like to say, oh, a murderer, right, a psychopath is rational. I disagree, right? I don't think you can get
Well,
yourself. Go ahead.
we might just be equivocating on rational here, because I just take rational or a rational agent to just be some agent that subscribes to or is constrained, at least concerning their belief system, to some system of logic.
Yes, but that system of logic through classical lens seems to be one of, like, conditional reasoning for the most part, unless you want to invite, like, universal instantiations into the mix, which I don't think as a classical logician is very, like, potent to the discussion. For most inference rules, they're, like, conditional. You know what I mean by the word if P then Q, and how the word if is so potent there, right?
Well, I'm not too sure what you mean by potent, but I'm not also
How could a dogmatic person utilize modus ponens?
if they have a particular position and then they render some justification, and the justification just consists of some inference, so then it
But
just renders
yes,
inference. That's just the
yes.
way I employ it.
But you see how it demands this ability to check the premises over and over again, right? If P then Q means that I can continuously ask you to substantiate P1 endlessly, and you cannot get frustrated. The moment you become unhospitable in my line of questioning, and this is why earlier I said your and I's discussion, bro, is wide open. DM me anytime. I don't know why you only have 33 followers, or if you have other accounts, but this discussion for me has been so productive. So I hope you see this as like a long-term discussion, right? Into the future, right? So that's why I said that, right? Because, again, going back to, like, imagine questioning what P1, substantiate P1 to a presuppositionalist, right? A tag supporter, and they get frustrated by the third time you ask it. Well, the whole method of science and logic demands the process to be, it's conditional to the very end. There's never an end to this condition.
Well, I mean,
Right.
I guess it just depends, because if you ask for some premise, if you ask some justification for the premise, specifically you ask to prove that the premise is sound. I think that if you guys both share, maybe particular background knowledge, maybe even priors, then you guys can come to something conclusive, and they can actually get, because in these type of conversations, people are able to justify premises, and it's not really problematic. It doesn't always go into this infinitum line of just constantly asking to justify, the next thing and asking for another stage of an argument.
No, and to that degree, I concede. You're absolutely right. I'm just saying that more importantly is this hospitality to someone who is a skeptic. If I cannot convince my opposition, they're the first to be invited to the table, right? All the other people I've convinced who walk away and we've had a charitable discussion and they accept my premises and they accept the justification, that's awesome, right? But the person I want at the table of the discussion is the constant skeptic, the honest, good faith, right? Skeptic.
Well, usually they're not really good faith.
That's what I'm saying. See? And that's what I'm saying. So the good faith element here is a component of logic. That's a moral demand of conditional reasoning. Because if we don't submit to that syntax, well, then fight. Then draw the sword, my friend, right? What else is there, right? If you're not going to be patient, if you're not going to be hospitable, right? If you're not going to steel man your opposition, then draw the sword and see where that gets you, right?
So if I may come in here, first of all, I'm like 50% lost in you guys' conversation. You guys are so deep into the whole syntax and everything. So, but the point is, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think Royman here is trying to base his whole logical Gongo's laugh. It's like I'm just telling the truth, man. I can't pretend. But the point is, I think, like I said, correct me if I'm wrong. Royman feels logic is all about, like you said, if P equals Q, if P then Q. So like we have those parameters and we have our logic gates. It's a ups or downs or like the NAND, the AND or gates or whatever. So the whole mathematical structure that we know what the end result is. So I know you guys talked about fuzzy logic or some kind of logic. So is that the other kind of logic where you could bring in like this whole thing about your what's it called the thing we're talking about, the emotional part? So is it like is it
What
yeah?
he's saying is just that, he has this value when it comes to dialectics or conversations where he takes it that both individuals or how many individuals in the conversation ought to be, honest. And I mean, sure, but I don't think that value needs to be adopted. And obviously, people don't adopt those values because, we see people ask for particular justification that, for claims that they themselves think that are obvious or true.
Atheism, hop in here before I hog the panel again. Or whatever you want. No pressure though, but if you have anything to say, go ahead.
All right, hang on. I was still trying to get sort of situated. No, I don't necessarily have anything right off hand to say. I've listened to y'all for a little while, and all of it sounds pretty good for the most part. I mean, I got things I could interject in the right situations, but I'll let you
For
go
sure.
and
Okay,
finish
no
what y'all
pressure.
got. So, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, man. No pressure at all. Yeah, you're welcome to just chill up here too.
Yeah, so what I was trying to say is I know there's some kind of logic that just plain cut, that's the way it is. Like when you're doing sciences or mathematics or
Yeah.
when it
Okay.
comes when it comes to dealing with human beings and dealing with people, I think these extra parameters come to play that we can't just throw under the rug. So this is where I'm kind of lost. So I'm trying to understand Royman's argument in that because I know you kept emphasizing on why considering people like your girlfriend, your being patient, and how they play a role, and they are an important factor in our logical reasoning process. So I don't. What I'm trying to understand is between you and Royman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Royman just saying those extra parameters are not as important, or that's where I got lost?
Yes, but
Oh, I
the
was just,
but the
yeah.
extra parameters are somewhat have not been exactly parsed out, but he is pushing back on what exactly those extra parameters are. Yes, but not
Okay.
right.
Okay.
I think Ryoman, right?
And I was just gonna clarify. I was just saying that from the beginning or from the onset, it's just that logic isn't inherently intertwined with morality, and then that's just from my position.
Right. But like even what Iman just said, like a word like patience. Do you think logic, would you concede that it, maybe we don't want to tie the word patience to morality, okay? But would you at least concede that something like patience is demanded for logic?
I'm not sure what that even means. What does it mean for patience to be
Okay,
demanded?
let me clarify a little bit. Demanded for a human to be able to adopt classical logical thinking. Is patience required for a human to be able to adopt classical logical syntax into their thinking?
No, I don't. If you're just saying that, like someone, if the question is just that if some person needs to have patience in order to learn logic or to actually be equipped with logical tools or devices, then no, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced of that.
Crazy. That is okay, we have a disagreement. Like I would fundamentally disagree.
Wait, but are you saying the former or the latter? Are you saying that um
They would have to be patient in order to like maybe the words like use logic, like in order to use,
that kind of sounds incoherent to me. I don't know what that would mean.
well, how would you say
Use
it?
logic?
How would you say it? Like in order to think rationally, to put their sentences and thoughts into a valid set of tangible uh thoughts. They would have to be patient.
I mean, I'm not really too sure. Just saying, are you just saying like when it comes to critical thinking that patience is, a virtue that's usually deployed or
I would say it's impossible. I would go as far as to say it's like
impossible?
impossible to, yeah, like
What do you mean
impossible
by
to
impossible?
like you cannot adopt classical inferential thinking without a virtue like patience. Someone who's impatient will over and over, time and time again, be representative of all the traits of someone who's irrational. There's never going to be a
I
time
mean,
where I find
even
someone who's impatient, right, and their thoughts are representing a rational. Their impatience may be rational, right? There's times where you should be impatient, right? But it doesn't mean that your thoughts are going to be rational at those times. Impatience, patience is demanded from the rational process.
I'm not too sure of that, but even if we like grant that like every time someone's impatient, they there begins to be like this psychological configuration where, they're not thinking rationally. That doesn't entail that it's impossible that an impatient person can have this constant state of affair of being rational. And that's just true in virtue of some logical modality.
Well, anytime that they're
There's no
patient,
consequence.
any time that they're impatient, it will remove their ability to be rational. I
Unless
would
like
I
you're
would
just
say.
like unless you're engineering, that particular trait within the expression. So you just take it that analytically that unpatientness or whenever someone is or someone holds the predication of unpatientness, right? That they're unrational. If that's just engineered within the term, then sure, I guess.
I would say though it's engineered within the syntax, not within my terminology. Like the
I'm not
con
sure what it means to be engineered in syntax. We're
well
talking
the
about the meaning of terms.
well
Meanings
the
are engineered in syntax.
well this is where it kind of got to my earlier question about like what do you perceive to be engineered in the syntax? Something is engineered in the form of rational classical logic. The syntax is engineering something, right? What is it engineering?
Well, yeah, the syntax. Well, I just take it the syntax can just be viewed as either the arrangement of a term or the arrangement of sentences.
In a very particular way, right?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah,
And
given
what
some.
that way, that particular way, seems to have psychological implications on stuff like patience.
I'm not sure. Well, I mean, I'm not too sure of that. If you can, inform me, give some insight on how that is, then yeah, that would be wonderful.
Well, in my everyday life, and I assume you're similar to me, someone who's displaying an obvious sign of impatience, I have yet to find that example that displays also with it a rational, coherent
Mm.
um, argument.
Well, again, that just goes back to my earlier thing. If you just take it that impatience analytically just entails that this person is irrational, then yeah, it's gonna just be logically impossible that someone impatient is gonna be rational. It's just gonna be.
Okay, but well, I don't want to
But
do that.
if you take a divorce of it, then you having this prior experience, this prior web of experience of constantly having people who are impatient be irrational, that doesn't entail that it's impossible, but maybe that might raise your credence to think that every time you engage or interact with someone who's impatient, they're going to be irrational.
You're right. Okay, well, I was trying to provide you sort of an inductive inference or example, but you're right to be skeptical of that. Obviously, any evidence I provide you is going to be somewhat limited, but I thought you would agree faster to that because, like, again, now I'm basically searching for you to provide me an example. Maybe you could clarify, like, do you have an example where like someone in your life has been impatient but also rational? Or like maybe not in your life,
No,
just an
I don't
example
have
in
any
general?
examples.
Could
My
we think of one? Like let's try to think of an example.
well, but does thinking of an example really concern whether this thing is? Because isn't
Well, we
like
don't have to. No, we don't have to. We don't have to.
isn't well, I mean, isn't like the relevant subject is whether this thing's impossible or not? Because whether we render any examples, that's not. I mean,
No, you're
sure.
right. You're right. It would just help us. I feel like it's just like a fun thought experiment to maybe help us get the conversation along. But no, we don't have to go in that direction. I
I
guess
mean,
my
if you really want to, I mean, I
curiosity,
guess we can try to, but
I'm letting my curiosity guide me here. It just makes me curious. I'm pondering. I'm like, okay. I'm entertaining and sympathizing with your pushback wholeheartedly, and I'm trying to like imagine like let's try to think of let's try to think of an example like someone well like I said earlier, there's lots of reasons to be impatient, right? You could rationally justify being impatient, right? Today I was impatient because nothing went wrong, right? I was held up in traffic, I was late for work, blah blah blah, right? So at the end of the day, now I get home and I clarify or I announce I'm impatient and these are the reasons, right? That seems like a fairly rational statement. Here's the
well,
problem. Oh,
another
go ahead.
example.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Oh, good catch. All right, good catch.
Well, yeah. Well, another example of somebody being quote unquote rational and having the predication of impatience would just be like, let's say we have two interlocutors disputing over a particular thesis, and one of them actually renders an argument, right? And let's say the other individual, right, wants to get like they want to be done with the conversation. They don't want to engage the conversation no longer. But rather than just leaving, they follow up with deconstructing, the other person's argument that they rendered in the conversation. So that's just going to be a case where their interlocutor is impatient, as they believe that the conversation is taking too long. They want to disengage. But rather than disengaging, this person just deploys or deconstructs the other person's argument.
Well, in that case, I would say they're like honest attempts at, deploying a deconstruction is still a form of patience. We have to kind of get a little pedantic, I suppose, about the word patience there,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's why I asked you earlier if you're just.
yeah, yeah. It's a hard word to maybe define, but like it does come with this like time constraint. The longer the person spends deconstructing, the more patient they obviously are. If they get flustered immediately, don't spend any time deconstructing other than a few sentences and then leave the live, like that's more incumbent upon an impatient person. Or here's actually another sign. Okay, so to your point, let's say they don't even deconstruct their interlocutor. but they go all the way to like personal attacks and ad homs. But they stick around for like an hour, right? They stay there,
I don't think this person would be impatient. I think they're just
right?
I would say their
In a
approach.
weird, yeah, I'm giving you that. In a weird way, they're being patiently vindictive, right? Okay. But we have to remember this word rationality, right? And how it's tethered to patience. I'm not saying that every single person who's patient is rational. I'm not saying that, right? I'm saying that rationality itself demands patience. So, although the person could be very patient in their torturous attempts at belittling another person, doesn't mean that they're presenting rational arguments, right? Rationality and even the mode of deconstruction and pure skepticism isn't quite embodying the rational method completely, right? Because the patience required to put forward an argument is what I'm talking about. A rational argument requires this stage of validation, validity, validating and checking the premises, which is an afterthought. It doesn't happen right away. Patience is something that, like I said earlier, has a very harsh time constraint. It requires, well, really, it would require an unlimited amount of time. Rationality is tentative. Logical, this is going to really drill home my point here. Logical thinking and syntax, right, is tentative. So the time constraints on logic and rational thinking are unlimited, bro. The moment you put a time constraint on it and you say, tomorrow, I have to have the answer, or I know the answer now, or I will know the answer at some point. Once I have this data, I'll know the answer. All of that is a fallacy. All of that is irrational thinking. True rational thinking demands ultimate patience because there's no time constraint on falsifying, right, your assertions.
I don't know if I would totally agree with that. Especially to hone in on the example of the person saying that they'll have the answer tomorrow. I think that we can have a situation like that, and that not because are you saying that like situations like that are fallacious? Because I don't think that's inherently fallacious.
To the degree that they aren't tentative, yes. The tentative nature of inductive claims, right, is extensive. Deduction gets us to certainty, but the
Oh, okay. If you're just saying that they're deploying induction,
yeah,
for justification for like a certainty claim, then obviously, yeah. Well, firstly, I think that's a categorical error. But
it's tentative, right? Because by definition,
what do you
inductive claims are
by
tentative.
tentative? Do you just mean that they're because what inductions are they're amplative, so they're types of they're types of reasonings that produce some likelihood.
What I mean by tentative is that the certainty, we can never reach certainty.
Well, yeah, that's not what induction aims to do, though.
Exactly. Well, I
Yeah, that's why I
agree.
said it was a categorical error for the person to
Yep,
deploy
I agree.
form of
Yeah, I
induction.
caught that. I caught that. But let's even go to deduction, right? Because the pushback would be that, well, deductive claims are certain, but we can't escape the tentative nature, right, of rationality through deduction. Deduction is still limited to the degree that we employ it. And that's why it has moral implications, right? The
Wait,
tentative.
what? I'm
Okay.
not sure how that follows. So you said the
Okay.
tentative nature of rationality implicitly or implies that it's intertwined with morality. I'm not seeing that connection.
Well, no, I'm saying that let's focus on since we both agreed on the tentative nature of induction and how induction doesn't aim at certainty. Let's look at deduction now. Deduction claims certainty.
Yeah,
right?
and are you saying that
Right?
relationship implies morality? Or
Well,
I'm not.
yes, we're verging on, and I'm gonna use some religious language loosely here, but we're verging on some pretty demonic ideas, right? To think, I know I'm using that really loosely, bro.
Yeah, wait, but
I don't go to church. I
before
don't go
you
to
go,
church, and I
well,
don't believe.
I'm not a theist, but before you
I
go on,
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to say before you give your point here, I just want to say that if you're trying to make or if you're attempting to make this claim of necessity, I might as well just inform you now, at least on some logical modality, that the system of induction doesn't necessarily imply morality. Now, if you're saying that it's complemented in virtue of maybe your priors or experiences that you've had, then I might grant that. But it seems like you're making a more robust claim. Saying that naturally or inherently, the system of induction actually does imply morality. Which I'm not even right now. I'm not even
Deduction.
sure what that means.
Deduction.
Yeah, deduction. Sorry, I may have
It's okay.
misspoke. It's like 1
No,
a.m. for me right now, but
no. I'm not, dude. I'm not pinning you on that. I'm just making it clear that
no, I was
we,
just clarifying.
yeah. So we agreed on the inductive problem. The problem of induction, right, is a like popularized thing, right?
Well, if you're talking about Davis Hume's critique, he
Yeah,
just says that induction isn't purely logical,
right. Because of well, no,
and he says
sure.
that.
You could summarize it that way, but I think we summarized it better earlier, just
Well, we
sort of
just said that it
highlighting the
didn't.
tentative nature.
Yeah, well, earlier we just established that it obviously doesn't produce some certainty.
That's right. The tentative. That's perfect, bro. Okay, so but now let's look at deduction and why I said demonic. The word the inflammatory word demonic with this word with how are we going to link the concept of certainty, right, to this method of deduction? That's
Link
basically your problem now.
my problem to link deduction to certainty.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Because
well,
that's the
given
claim. That's the claim, right?
given various logical theorems and axioms and the stipulations, these things literally cannot, if true, and you're utilizing the sequences of the well-formed formulas correctly and the inference rules, if true, these things literally cannot be, the conclusion cannot be false.
Right. In a way, would you agree they're like, would you say that they're tautological?
Like what I say, like particular axioms or like what are you asking?
Mm,
'Cause I just take it out.
any deductive?
A
Could you
tautology is a
right?
formula. Yeah, I just take it out. Tautology is a formula in which given some truth table, truth value inputs, that the column is always just going to be T in every possible combination. That's
Yes.
what it means for something to be tautological. Just that given a truth table, we have all these columns that render different truth value outputs, and then they're all just going to be T. So
Yes.
all true.
Do you see a similarity between tautology and the law of identity?
If you're just asking whether I believe the law of identity is tautological, then
Sure.
I guess
Okay.
or I mean, at least when we talk about classical logic, the law of identity is just gonna have truth. It's just gonna have T under all
So
columns.
okay. So we're kind of getting lost in the weeds a little bit, but I wanted to kind of go there to show how our psychology suffers from tautological thinking in the sense of it. Wait, I got to be careful with how I say this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being really loose here, but like there's got to be something to be said about how certainty affects our psychology and rationality. If we cling
I
to
believe it
certain,
can. Yeah, it
go
definitely
ahead.
can. I believe it definitely can, but again, we just
That
have
we
to
can
flesh
what?
out.
Wait, that we can what?
Yeah, so I just believe that's like being fixated on certainty or having this obsession with certainty can definitely affect your psyche. But
Right.
No, we have to be clear and we have to specify, our position here. So if you're just saying that, um, there can be this relationship between being fixated or having this psychological obsession with certainty, and that can actually just reflect back negatively on your psyche, then yeah, I don't deny that. But if that's just a claim there, then that's almost trivial.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't grant that it's trivial. I think you've outlined it really well, man. I think you've steel manned my position pretty good there. I would just further point out that so therefore the deductive method seems to be one other than one that is aimed at certainty. There is a way to adopt deduction without clinging to certainty, even though that's the claim of classical logicians that outline what deduction is. In our
Well,
every
wait,
in our
did you
in
say?
our go ahead,
Oh
sorry.
yeah, sorry. I just I like to, at least my approach with that like this. I like to isolate particular claims just so I don't forget them. So did you? I just will. Yeah. Yeah. So I was gonna ask, did you say that classical logicians traditionally or generally say that deduction has something to do with like emotions and stuff? Because I'm
Certainty.
with certainty. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear it. I just misheard.
No, don't be sorry. Thank you for questioning that, clarifying. Yeah, it's certainty. It's this claim of certainty that you admitted might affect the psychology of thinkers, and it's also the claim of certainty that most logicians say deduction is a method of. And I'm saying there's a way to adopt deductive rational thinking as a method that isn't clinging to certainty, but it requires a moral component,
Hmm. Now, what does
right?
that mean? What does that mean to subscribe to some deduction that isn't aimed or within its procedure doesn't render some outcome of certainty? What does that mean?
Can I
Well,
give an example? See if
yeah,
it
go
fits
ahead. Go
this.
ahead.
So there is forgive me, I'm speaking from a religious background, but it's an example that actually happened in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So I want to see if it fits this. So a man came to the Prophet Muhammad with grapes, and he said, "Oh Prophet, I have this grapes as gifts for you. Can you accept them from me? It's my first time coming to you, please." And the other companions, like his disciples, are seated, and he starts to eat these grapes. And he takes them and he eats them, and the guy was happy. A poor man, he has nothing. Like he's just like he's so excited. You can see the big smile in his face that the prophet accepted his grapes. And then the disciples or the companions are kind of a little worried, because usually when the prophet is giving something, he usually shares with them. But he didn't say anything until the man, after the prophet ate the grapes, he was happy and he left. And then they said, "You usually give us the food you have. We ate with you. What happened? These grapes, like, why didn't you share with us?" And he said, "Because the grapes were bad, they were sour. He felt if he had given to them, they would have shown dislike for the because of the taste of the grapes, and the man would have felt that his gift was not good. So he had to eat them to make the man happy that he accepted his food, and everything went well." What does that example fit in?
Well, from the people's perspective, they just had this expectancy that was derived from their priors, and the expectancy, clearly failed there.
Mhm.
And then, so they're not really using that. That's more of Bayesian reasoning or
No,
reasoning.
I'm talking about the reasoning of the prophet himself at that point, not letting
Yes.
not yeah, that's my point. So he's
I
trying to
don't think that's.
consider
I don't
the
think that's
feelings of
necessarily.
this person, try not to make the person feel like his gift was. It's just like when a wife asks you, "Hey, am I looking good today? Does this makeup make me ugly?" And I don't know, you okay. Even if sometimes it's not okay. It's your wife. You don't want to tell your wife she looks ugly. So in certain circumstances, you might be telling something that might not be true, but it's not like it's not you are hurting the person just to make. I don't know if I
It
kind of
seems like
get
it
what.
seems like
Yeah.
I don't think that the prophet is necessarily using deduction, but it seems like the prophet, he has these grapes or this food, and he has some consideration of his peers or these other guys, where he doesn't want them, to intake. I think you said the food was like rotten or something. You said something was
No,
wrong
no.
with
So
the
the
food or
the
something like
taste
that.
sour. The
But he was
grapes
Oh
are
yeah, oh
only
yeah,
sour.
the
he
taste was
was
sour.
only he was
Yeah.
only concerned with offending the person who brought the grapes. He wasn't concerned about
Exactly.
like poisoning his
Exactly. No.
peers.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh well, again, I don't see how the analogy fits with what we said initially. It just seems like the analogy is almost redundant.
So the question is, where does that syntax come in for considering the feelings of this person? What would you have logically done? Oh, these grapes are sour. Oh, shoot. Oh my gosh. Like, I don't know.
Like
Like,
if I had the grapes and I was like aimed or I wanted to give them to my peers, what would I think if I knew the grapes were sour?
yeah. So somebody brings
I
it.
Well,
think I think
before
I think
giving the
you gotta
grapes, I
paint.
would just inform the
Yeah.
people that, oh yeah, these are sour, and if you like it, I mean, here you can have some. But
But okay, but I think you gotta paint a bit of a deeper picture. This is a tribal. Let's say it's like a tribal leader, right? A cultural
Exactly.
leader.
Uh-huh.
And let's say that this neighboring peasant who brought the blueberries is from a neighboring village, and you have the potential as a leader here to offend and cause multiple disruptions all across, right, your neighboring lands. If you spit the grapes out, laugh in his face, and send him home, scared and running, while your whole tribe mocks him, it's a very different thing than sitting down enjoying the grapes calmly and letting them go off without embarrassment, right? And so I would say that the deductive method is being used, right? If I'm painting a picture deeper, and I know I'm
Hmm.
using my bias there to inform my own opinion on the matter, but to Steelman his point, it's like the deductive method is used in an environment when you don't exactly know all of the answers. And
Hmm.
all you have to go on is your morals. If you disregard your morals, you will be lost in a fog of cynicism and skepticism without the humanity to align yourself with the other, the opposition, the neighboring foe who's offering you blueberries, right? Be gratuitous at the very least. He's offering you blueberries. Imagine spitting them in his face and mocking him because they were sour. What an insult. Is that rational? Could a rational leader defend the act of spitting out sour blueberries offered up, right, as a donation into the neighboring village's face? Would you say that that could be argued as a rational act?
well, it just seems when we talk about rationality here, you haven't cast it out. But wait, even then, even if we say that it's not a rational act, they're just rendering a case where deduction is complemented or is joint with morality, which I already said initially. I don't deny that these things, can be relatas. They can be things within relationships.
So are you saying there's only like certain situations where there could be a joint between these parameters for the logic to work in a certain way, or are you saying it's not always needed, except in
Well,
some?
I'm just saying that like we can have cases where someone is both logical and moral, and that's just something I don't deny. I made that clear initially.
But can we have a case where someone's logical and immoral, bro?
And immoral. Also, whenever you say immoral, are they immoral in virtue of their own normative ethics or in virtue of some sort of general normative ethics?
They're not immoral in any sense of ethics, only rationality.
Well, I just take it that immorality is a concept that is deployed or that is inherently derived from some moral framework. What it means for
But
something to be
but it
immoral is
doesn't.
that
No,
it
no.
is
See, and that's
it ought
an
not to be
interesting.
done.
That's a very interesting disagreement we have too, because what I'm saying is that to assess someone's rational state would be to assess their morality. I don't think you can parse out someone's rationality from their ethics and morality. To say that you can purely decipher someone's rational state would be to separate the humanity from their being. It's a dehumanizing act to believe that somehow we can separate rationality from human morality, basically.
Can
Well, to
I?
make sure that we're not, oh, sorry to interrupt, but to make sure we're not equivocating here, again, from my perspective, it just seems like you're engineering terms in a way that, they're just going to analytically be derived, supporting or offering for consequence.
I'm trying not to.
I just take it that rationality analytically isn't going to be something that's confined to morality and vice versa. Now, that's not to say that these things cannot be joined or complemented with each other. But I just don't see any reason for why I think that these things are necessary.
Yeah. Man, jump in if you want.
Yeah.
And then
So
for
I
the,
just no. What I want to say is totally different. I wanted to ask for Royman's permission because I was falling in and out of sleep earlier. So I want to ask Logic Troll, the host, because I love this discussion so far. If I can get the recording of this session, but I want
Okay.
Royman's permission. If he's okay with it, yeah.
oh wait,
Go
well
ahead.
this.
He wants the recording. He wants the recording of the live.
No, I don't want to record.
Oh, I don't.
I think yeah, I think
don't
it's
record, but
automatically recorded as the host. So I was gonna see if you can send me a clip of this session.
I tend to, all my best lives, just upload them to my YouTube. So if you go to my profile, I have the link tree to my YouTube channel. And yeah, I'll upload this to my YouTube channel.
Please,
Yeah,
please,
I will.
please do.
I will. I will,
I
bro.
think I need to go back and listen to you and Raymond. I think I only got like 50-60% of what you're talking about. So I need to go back and sit down. I'm a slow learner. I need to go back and then get
Nah, man,
this
you're
point.
doing
But I
just
think
fine.
it's been
yeah.
an intelligent conversation so far, and I just don't want to lose the context. So thank you for
I'm
that.
so
Yeah.
impressed by Ray Oman. I can't believe we haven't met before and had a
Oh
conversation,
man,
man.
Raymond,
Yeah.
he's I love him so much. His arguments and it's fantastic. It's
So good.
yeah, fantastic. I'm
You're one of the
telling you.
best interlocutors I've ever engaged with, bro. For real.
I wouldn't say that. I've literally only read like entry level stuff or like introduction
Nah, dude.
to logic.
You're
But
too humble, bro. You're too humble, bro.
I don't. I mean, I'm just honest. But I did want to say this. If what you mean by immoral is not, what's meant by bad or impermissible, given some ethical framework, then I'm not too sure what you're saying. Because if you're just saying something like, can someone be rational, and then immoral, by immoral you just mean they're not rational. Can someone be rational and not rational simultaneously? Then I think that's just going to be trivially true, at least classically. That's just going to be a contradiction.
Yes. So I get all of that. All I want to say to you is that if you are claiming that morality is not necessary for rational thinking, then I'm struggling to see how that's possible in the same light. So we're just at like opposite ends of the skeptical road here.
Well, we can merely just conceptually scrutinize, the proposition, and then given some logical modality, there's going to be no contradiction that obtains. Now, if that's true, then it's just going to be considered, possible. Because what it means for a proposition to be possible, that it just doesn't, there is no contradiction that obtains from the proposition.
Right, but okay, so the issue that I'm having though is that you want to assess rationality without a moral framework, right? You claim to be able to assess through this logical modality of possibility and necessity, the rational method without any moral framework. That's your claim, right? A moral framework is not necessary.
Yeah, and to engage in or to deploy, specific logical devices. Yeah,
Right.
moral frameworks are not necessary.
Okay. So we're on the same front here. Let's be on the same ground.
Oh, he's paused.
Sorry. At this point of the conversation, let's assume we're on the same ground there, and let's only try to use the modality of logic to assess, well, the rationality of another person. So what we're trying to do here is we're not going to use morals. We're going to, I don't know, we could paint any hypothetical you want, but let's imagine we're going to some crazy exotic island, right, where all the population of the island speaks some crazy exotic language. Maybe even it's an alien planet, right? We go to an entirely different planet, and we have to figure out if the beings that there's life on the planet, and we're trying to deduce, are they rational, right? Is there any way to communicate with them? Are they just are they like rational to the point of an animal where we could like condition them at least, or are they rational like to the point where we could actually communicate with them? Like how rational are they, right? So
I'm
what
not too sure
method?
what you mean by rational there. Because
Well,
earlier I just
okay.
defined rational as just the adoption or some subscription to, some particular epistemic norm, or some collection of epistemic norms, or
So is the reason you push back because I used animals?
well, it just seems like, at least, maybe I forgot, right? It's getting late, but you just never told me what you meant by rational. And then when I defined it, I think you actually illuminated to me that you weren't, referring to that type
No,
of
we could
definition.
use your no. We could use your definition. We can use your definition of rational
Oh,
there.
okay.
That's fine. But I'm seeing its limitations in this exotic environment. Do you see its limitations?
Well, what's meant by limitations?
How would we measure do you think we could measure the rationality of the like aliens on the planet purely based off of your like harsh definition there?
Well, I don't. Well, given my definition or my delineation, I don't think that it aims to do stuff like that. It doesn't aim to like gauge other agents. It doesn't necessarily aim to gauge other agents' degree of rationality.
That's an interesting point. Okay. Well, but your definition should be substantive enough to do that because how else? The definition of rationality is meant to differentiate between that which is rational and that which isn't, right? That's the whole point of um like a rigorous definition.
Yeah, and I think my definite, or if I haven't highlighted it before, but if we just take it to be some subscription of epistemic norms, particularly, propositional calculus, or, inferential reasonings, then we just say that someone's irrational if the reasonings are, not things that are constrained to these things. Or, I guess we could say, like, if they commit some, logical fallacy where the reasonings are erroneous logically.
Right. Okay, but
So I think it
but
does actually illuminate, what's irrational and rational.
well, okay. So to what degree are we confident in stating, right? Because this is where now I don't. I'm so this conversation is so good that I'm like even hesitating to step forward because I'm like liking where we're at right now. I don't want to rush, but I'm like, okay, basically, let's say we're in a colonizer's position where we're coming up on a tribe of like emotionally aggravated, you know, people who don't speak our language, and they're shooting arrows at us, and they wanna like unalive us. Well, so they're irrational. Like everything about their actions like is like an animal on another planet, right? They're not employing any propositional logic. They're not even attempting to communicate. They're just trying to, right? defend themselves. So, but do you see how, like, over the long term, rational thinking demands us to be like hospitable with, like, I don't know, our opposition or even an animal, right? All the way down to an innocent teeth-bearing wolf who threatens our daughter or whatever. There's like some level of empathy that goes along here with a rational mind. Like,
Well,
do you
strictly,
not kind of see what I'm saying there?
well, I think that we then would have to modify, because I think that when I say that a person is rational for defending themselves, I don't think that I'm referring to, some subscription of epistemic norms, or like, some adoption of some logical system. I think that they just have good reason, um, maybe pragmatic, maybe emotional, but they just have good reason or some reason to defend themselves. And I think that that's not. I don't know if I would say that that's irrational. So I
Okay,
think that
okay,
I think
but
there's different senses of rationality that we're
yes,
speaking about,
but but
that
you
needs to be
but the
involved.
but the point is that there's no method that we would be detecting their rationality. And I know that you said earlier that, like, your definition of rationality isn't really, or maybe rationality itself isn't really meant to be able to, like, test or observe it in other beings. But I suppose that's where I'm actually arguing and saying, well, no, the method of rationality is this power to be able to empathize and observe and communicate with other beings that are completely unlike us, right? That's the power of rationality. That's what makes us an apex predator on this planet. That's also what, in a lot of ways, caused certain colonization and assimilation through history, right? Like, the more, um, now you could say tyrannically tolerant cultures were actually the more successful cultures, right? If you were barbarically um, destroying your enemies, well, you were also inefficiently acquiring your opposition's assets. There's an element to, like, adopting the cultures of others and, like, being tolerant, right? This colonization process has an element of rational deduction and patience, if you want to say that word too, along with it, that doesn't immediately force us to make assumptions about what is and isn't rational. That's my whole point here. Is like, if we went to the alien planet and we immediately assumed that anything that isn't pr- propositionally communicating with us isn't rational, right? Then we would suffer from our own confirmation bias. And, like, your willingness to steel man and say, hey, the tribe that we're colonizing is just defending themselves because they're scared or whatever, you being willing to be like, they're just actually acting rational. Well, that's kind of straw manning what I'm trying to say, because you have to put yourself into the position of an alien, right? An alien setting where you don't know, you're under threat, bro. You don't know what's rational and what's not. Most things you encounter are not rational. A bear in the woods is not rational, right? Would you agree with that?
Uh, in the sense that I invoked earlier, yeah, sure.
Right, because it can't have, like, epistemic norms. It's not it's
Yeah.
not operating under any epistemic norms, right?
Oh, yeah. I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that
It's
there's.
it's merely surviving. It's merely surviving through um I don't know, what would you call
Well,
it?
when I gave the example of the defense
Yeah.
thing, when I said rationality, I was just using a different sense of it. Like, I guess I was more saying that, like, in my perspective, I don't think that they're, acting illogical for, trying to defend themselves in virtue of their fear. But that's
Yes,
not the
but
same
what
sense. But
yes,
I'm
yes.
using different senses there. So whenever you say that, these people are rational, what are you like? What are you saying there? Like, what do you? So, like, just fill in the blanks, right? Someone is rational if and only if
Well,
What?
I agree to your definitions. They operate under but I wouldn't use the term epistemic norm. I would just say they operate under, let's use classical logic. There's some evidence or disposition, right? Or I can observe some attempt at communicating through propositional logic, classical logic, inferential symbolic logic, right? If there's no symbolism to be had, if there's no rational deduction, there's no. So that's where I'm saying it seems as though as a mere human, all I can do is like observe what you said is the epistemic norms, which seem to be tied to a sense of morality. If as a human, if you want to say logic can exist out in the ether
Oh, do you see he's
without
gone? He said he lost connection.
oh, I
He
think he's
dropped out.
coming back.
Yeah.
I
Well,
got
he's
him again.
okay.
Um,
Well, you guys are busting my brains here. so, so it's
I didn't get it. Like I literally lost connection as soon as
that's
you
fine.
started
That's
talking.
no,
fine.
you're good, Norman. Yeah.
I didn't.
Here's the main point I want to drill home. If you want to say logic can exist in the ether, right, out there somewhere in another realm without morality, that's fine. But as mere humans, there's a moral component to adopting rationality. We cannot tap into or utilize the tool without humbling ourselves before it, right?
Well, you just said yourself that you know you cannot be rational divorced of moral consideration. So that's you aren't actually subscribing to what I said initially, as it mine just merely constrains to um as you said it, classical logic or maybe inferential logic, propositional calculus, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, in that sense, then sure, because analytically, we're going to actually have to consider um morals.
So you would agree there that at least being a rational creature comes with moral responsibilities, that kind of thing?
I
In
mean,
in our in our
given your
environment.
lights, yeah, sure.
What's that, sorry?
Yeah, I said given your lights, yeah, sure.
But okay, but you would also want to say that like logic could exist out there in the ether with no morality
I don't
tied
know
to
what
it.
that means. I'm not sure what that means.
Well, like you want to paint this picture of morality without, or sorry, you want to paint this picture of rationality without morality.
Mm, Well, yeah, like what I said earlier was just that, and I still hold to this. I said that, someone can still be rational, that be divorced of moral consideration. Like within that instance or interval of time, they aren't considering morals, or they aren't dealing or concerning anything of moral values.
But they're still putting their sentences into like valid propositional. Whoa, I got an echo.
Like for example, like let's say, um, yeah. So let's say like I have this claim or this position that God doesn't exist, and then I render some argument for that. You could say, and like the argument's valid or whatever, and maybe it's sound or whatever. That can be an instance of where we see someone acting rationally as they're utilizing particular formal stipulations or formal devices, philosophical formal devices to justify their position. But that entire scenario has nothing to do with morality, and that's just what I'm saying. Now, obviously, I think that you can make inferences about morality. I don't deny that. So
Uh, so you're interesting. So you're saying like let's build the scenario where this completely immoral person is now at the table putting forward their argument in a rational way. For that moment, I cannot see how they aren't acting morally in that moment. Like, I can't imagine someone like wielding a weapon, attacking with violence. Like, I'm trying to paint a picture here of someone acting immorally while also representing their stance from a rational, like, although their actions may be rational to defend themselves or act violently, right? The very act of encoding symbolic logic requires this like discipline that isn't of gnashing teeth and like biting and defending. It's like it's a method of discourse which most of the animal kingdom can't even like get their psychology to because of the survival mode that they're in, right? And we moralize our privileges, our hierarchy in the chain of survival as a moral responsibility. We don't want to act like animals, right? So we like pity the animal in the cage gnawing their teeth. We're such an apex predator, like logic has basically relieved us from feeling threatened by at the base by anything with gnashing teeth or big claws or a threat in the normal wilderness, right? Because we're so capable basically of like abstracting our thoughts that it to observe the inhumanity of an animal eating another animal that it has just unalived is like to feel the like repulsiveness of our very like insides, like to deny that moral connection to our psychology and the rational method is to deny humanity. Like, if I were to anthropomorphize onto the lion that the lion is evil, right? Because it eats the antelope, it would be exactly extracting the very essence of rationality. I would not be giving credence to the fact that this animal isn't rational. And why am I assuming that? Well, because it's eating another animal. I mean, if I were to observe a starving human doing that, I would also, right, basically assume the person's at a level of irrationality. If the person then articulated their reasoning and said, I was starving on a mountain for 75 days after a plane crash, and this person was frozen, the only way to survive was to commit cannibalism, well, they've now rationalized their position, right? It's a completely different circumstance than a psychotic person in a prison cell, like for no reason having a break of psychology and cannibalizing their cellmate,
Wait,
right? It's a
it just
complete.
seems like um you take it, at least in those scenarios, that rationality is just, you know, someone acting upon a reason they have, while irrationality is someone having no reason and they act upon something. Because in the jail cell, the person you said is like psychotic and they kill people for no reason or something like that. And then in the other one, you said that they were in like a airplane crash and only way for them to survive was to cannibalize their.
Yeah, because I'm appealing to like our sense of like judgment in court, right? Like a court would take in consideration the circumstances of the event and basically determine the rationality of the perpetrator, right? I'm trying to sparse out the level of rationality because
Yeah, but
that is
it just seems
right.
like your
Not
notion.
morality, not morality.
Yeah, I
Think
know, but
about
it
it
just seems like your
morally. The
notion of
same act is
rationality is
taking
more.
place, right? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it seems like your notion of rationality is something that is more than just epistemic norms. It's something more than what I said initially.
Well, no. It's
And
the
then
same.
I would also ask, like, if you take it as someone's irrational, that they have no reason to do something. What if we have like a person who unalives people for pleasure, So the reason he does it is because he gains some sort of self gratification or pleasure from doing it. Then he has a reason.
Yes.
So what
Yes.
would he be rational?
Epistemic norms are not reasons.
Well,
Would you agree?
I'm not sure if I would agree to that. Cause like let's say I have this norm, at least when it comes to talks concerning whether propositions are true or not. And the norm is that, I evaluate and scrutinize, I deploy particular inferences for, claims I make and stuff like that. It just, one that conducts my, or regulates how I approach dialectics. I don't think that that's going to be divorced of what you said.
I'm sorry, I got a little lost there.
Oh, so you want me to repeat myself? Yeah, so...
I'm trying to see how epistemic norms... Okay.
I just take it an epistemic norm is just some standard, some social, maybe personal standard of evaluation concerning epistemic conduct or concerning epistemology, how, or epistemic acquisition to be exact, how we gain knowledge or, what makes some proposition true, etc. It just revolves around justification and stuff like that.
Yes.
And the norms are just going to be like different systems of ways of like approaching that. So like
normativity, usually normativity is linked to like morality, isn't it?
Well, what a norm is, I think a norm is just denoted as some standard, some socially shared standard. And I think that's just what it is defined as.
You wouldn't say that logic is like universal?
Logics are universal. I'm not sure what that means, but to clarify, I'm not sure norms are linked to ethics necessarily. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, but you also wouldn't say that like logic is... You would say that logic is merely an epistemic norm?
Yeah, I guess I could say that.
Huh.
Wait, like, are you like a realist about logic? You think like logic is...
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily incompatible with the view that logic just reduces down to like some syntactical system, kind of like how English has like grammatical rules and stuff like that, and things that register certain sentences to be. Yeah, so I don't think that's incompatible with what I'm saying, but I mean, I'm just not sure if I would be a logical realist or think that like logic is the description of reality. It's everything is constrained by the particular axioms.
Yeah, like I would say that basically axiomatic reasoning itself is somewhat multi-dimensional, if that makes any sense.
Well, I'm not too sure what you're saying there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that was a little bit of a squabble. But like, what is an axiom? Some sort of like fundamental self-evident truth that we kind of presuppose or like take as an assumption to build a formal system off of, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess axioms can be considered like foundational claims. What, can you hear me? Because my
Yeah.
I see like the Wi-Fi thing.
You got some background
Okay, yeah.
noise, but you're
Just
okay.
makes sense. Okay. Well, that's probably my fan in the back, but yeah. So yeah, I think we can consider axioms to be like these fundamental, I guess, propositions. I don't know if I would say propositions. I don't think that axioms are considered propositions in the literature. I'm not too sure about that, but axioms are definitely things that concern or are fundamental to some system.
Do you think we could build? Do you
And
think we
they're
could build
considered
one
to be
without
and they're
words?
considered to
Do you
be
think we could
true.
build an axiom
And
without
they're considered to
words?
be true. And they're considered to be true non-differential. Can we build an axiom without words? Well, it just depends on what you mean there. If by build, you just mean, you utilize like words or letters, then yeah, it's just gonna be trivially true that you cannot build a axiom without words.
Well,
I'm not sure what you mean by
well,
build there.
I try to. Like this kind of gets me to something like the Cartesian plane. Do you know what that is?
I've heard of. I think I've heard of that before.
It's
But I'm
just
not.
the grid. It's the grid system. The grid, like the x and y axes, build
Mhm.
the Cartesian
Yeah.
plane.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Well, I would picture that in my mind as a formal system that seems to have like axioms or like fundamental self-evident truths that build a formal system that don't require words.
Well, again, it just means it just depends on what you mean by build. I wasn't too clear on what you meant there, but
Well,
if you're just
I was thinking I
you
guess
can adopt what you
geometrically,
think
like
works better, then sure.
the grid system is just a series of like geometric shapes, right?
Sure, yeah. Hello?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so it does seem as though like we can build a formal system from an axiom without words, I guess, because that's what the Cartesian plane is. I mean, the grid system interprets any data, any semantics, any variable that we input into it.
Well, I'm just not clear on the example there. So, what are the axioms that are within the grid system? Can you illuminate those to me?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have. I'm not formally like able to do this, I don't think, but I would say that it would require something like the Peano axioms of mathematics, like the formal axioms of math, or at least addition, and then perhaps
Wait, and you said that
yeah.
can we build axioms without words? Yeah, then obviously, because I take it that arithmetic axioms are not words but formulas.
Right. And then but the Cartesian plane seems to be like, this is kind of where I get like, and I've been criticized for this view, but like I would see the cross being the origin or the center of the Cartesian plane as a axiom of the geometry. So without words, what's the axiom of the grid? Well, it's cross. The center of the grid is two intersecting lines juxtaposed perpendicularly to each other. Like that's the axiom
Well,
geometrically.
I'm not sure what that means there, but
Yeah, I know. I've been criticized for that. No one really knows what I mean by that. But it seems crucial to the grid that we have a cross. Like, how could we deny the juxtaposition of lines in the center of the grid that give us the landscape to then compare data on any variable in the scientific method? It just seems like a very impressive symbolic formal system.
But yeah, I mean it's 2 a.m. right now. It's getting late, so if you want to wrap up anything.
Sorry, I'm just smoking here. Yeah, man. It's no pressure to hang around or whatever. We need to get to bed. I really enjoyed the conversation, man. And I hope to, continue this further and keep talking. Yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
you a
cool,
lot.
man.
It was fun.
All right, I'm gonna say I followed you by the way, so
I followed you too. I don't know how you only have 33 followers. Like one of the more intelligent people I've seen on this app. But yeah, atheism. Feel free, you guys, to jump in. Now my energy is wavering. That took a lot out of me. That was a really good discussion, though.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're been, this whole time you kind of wanted to get at. Let me see if I can, you know, regurgitate that. Um, you're wanting to take the rational or irrational, which is the reasoning and thought processes of a person, while they're uh, doing something that could have its morality view of their behavior when doing something, and thus you want them to be able to either say that while they're doing something moral, they're being rational, and when they're doing something immoral, they're being irrational.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I can agree with that. I can understand. There's some things that I can explain that um, could have some opposition in the academic world, but that opposition can be squashed by understanding what I'm explaining. So that's the kind of the first disclaimer I would put in there. So here I'll give you.
Oh shoot, you're on teacup atheism. Can't hear you when you leave that. Oh no. I feel like you're just about to.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you
I
are.
see. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I can't go pull up the the internet
Unfortunately,
option
no.
that.
If you leave the app, then yeah, I can't hear you.
Well, I didn't leave that. I kind of minimized it. But all right, I'm going to try. I read it once, and basically it says there's two sides to that. There is a side, like academically, that would say you can, and it kind of all depends on how you formulate and framework your morals and all that. And then there is the side that would want to say somehow, whatever reason, I don't remember now, you could not. I mean, there are some people, and I would actually say they are more atheistic, but they are people that does not like words that seem to come from what they call religious texts, such as words like good and evil. So they want to separate the atheistic thinking type of logical person, that's trying to do logic and be, say, an atheist position. They're wanting to have their academics or whatever free from language that they see is what they call religious language, such as good and evil. And in doing so, they remove that from any of their logic that they establish or the academics that are influenced or whatever by the atheist. But and in doing so, it's an injustice. So I can make the first thing. Let me say that the logic is a word that I found goes back to logos in Greek, and it's thought, word, speech, and reasoning. If you can understand, reasoning basically done in your head, but there's thought, word, and speech. So you can have a thought without having a word for it. You can think of something that you're 1 year old and you haven't developed a word for something you can have a thought or see or whatever. And then there's the word is basically meaning like the language. We now have, language. We can label things with words. So that's kind of the word. And then the speech is then the part of like communicating it and transferring it, to somebody else. And in all those sort of instances, it's kind of like they're sort of the same thing. Whenever we think of, say, a cow and we call it a cow and then we see the cow out in the field, it's kind of like, that's all a cow. It's just sort of in a different state of understanding or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think I
Okay.
think you're
So,
summarizing it really well. Yeah.
okay. So, all right, then let me get to the baseline. I kind of set those little bit of foundations too. make this statement that, like I say, a lot of academics would want to say this just ain't right, but I can show you how it is right. But the statement is, the knowledge of good and evil is the basis for logic.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so, and how do we, and here's another biblical word I'm going to throw at you that an academic mind doesn't typically like. And I'm not like foundationally religious, you know. I struggle through my religion, but how do we gain this revelation of good and bad, if I'm to use that word appropriately? Like how, if it's not through rationality, right? It's the other way around. We require a knowledge first of good and evil before we get to the rational method. Where does this revelation of good and evil come from? How do we get it?
You go to the grocery store.
What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm serious, but yeah, it is funny. Yeah, that's fine. Laugh. It is funny. I like try to have a little humor, but true. All right, goods. They call them goods because there's a lot of them in the store, but they're called goods. So if you go to the shelf and you get a good, those references there is a noun. It's not an adjective. The academics want to hold the word good in the adjective use and not recognize good as a noun. So that's the big point there, where the academic type people or some of these other people that even what you might call some of that classic logic, that's why they try to exclude good and evil from any of their type of processes, because they're going on, you know, the adjective form of good, which you could say, well, chocolate ice cream is good. And well, for the next person, well, see, that can be subjective things. Okay. You know, subjective opinions as to what, you know, is good or not good in your liking. Now, the good on the store shelf is a thing. It's a noun. It exists. And when it's a good, it's like it meets a standard in quality to be on the store shelf. I mean, if it's damaged or it gets damaged, they got to take it off because you know, somehow it's, you know, not in the form and shape or whatever, you know, a canned good break or, you know, deforms, whatever. Or some meat rots or something, you know, it does not meet the standard. So standard is certainly a word that is proper to have in there as having a standard.
Bro, I just want to say I love so much of everything you're saying so much. Like you're drilling it home. I'm gonna continue to play devil's advocate though, because I really want you to continue to like expand on what you're saying, because I like it so much. Okay. As a skeptic, though, someone would say, still, didn't answer my question. How do I get this revelation of good? I go to the store, like so many people do, right? And all they do is victimize themselves to the stuff on the walls and how expensive it is and how all the killing and mass production that's gone along with the quote unquote goods on the store. So, how do we really get this fundamental understanding in our heart of hearts what the good and the evil is? Like, where does it come from? Can we get it without God? Can we get it? Is there a way to get through to the atheists and the skeptics? Right? I hope you hear my pushback from like good faith.
Yeah, I think I can understand what you're saying. So let me first kind of go with, I mean, I've already had these thoughts going. This is kind of where I'm going to explain. Let me kind of go back a little bit. The good on the shelf, even though it's, you know, it could be some cannibal's can of, you know, soup or something from a cannibal for a cannibal to eat, you know, killing a person, whatever. Well, that's, or unalive. Anyways, that, now that is not, you know, that's like the adjective form in a sense, but well, I'm using the noun good as in, okay, it's a thing that it exists, such as a can of food. It has a label, it has a name, it has ingredients, it has a shape that is also like uniform, standardized among other things of its likeness. So it's either it meets the standard or it makes the standard for that can of whatever. So that's a part of what good noun is. Not good adjective, but a good noun, for a good to be used as a noun. So then let's step into this way. As good and evil establishes is the foundation for the knowledge of good and evil. Foundation for logic is let me ask you this: what is P? P is I'll go ahead and answer it. P is an algebraic variable for something that we can then call a good, such as a thing on the shelf. So it's kind of like initially we're going to have either a good that we can label P, or we can label it chicken noodles, or we have that the not P. The not P is we're absent of the can. It's totally gone. There's not a can there, but we know that there should be, or there could be, but it's not there. So that's how the good and evil, having a good, is the establishment of the three laws of logic. Is you first have to have a thing that you can label it with P, but you'd have to understand, you need to know it, let's say, adjectively good enough to know that it's a good noun. You follow me?
Absolutely. And I wanted to connect this earlier to the etymology of logos and how you see that as connected.
Oh, how do I see it connected?
Yeah, because you really eloquently tied in how variable thinking in propositional logic ties in, right, the laws of logic to,
Uh-huh.
to basically, I don't know, this development of conditional reasoning, right? Like you're trying to connect the good and evil, the other understanding of the good and evil, to the ability to understand the laws of logic. And I think that the word logos connects all of those things etymologically somehow, but I'm not maybe sure how.
Yes, well, that's a part. When you kind of like you're evaluating, is this a P or a not P? All right, so what is the P? Okay, but in regards to, say, the rational thinking, okay, let's say, P is rational, not P is irrational. So, and then the person's behavior, we look at the person's behavior, and they are going 60 miles an hour over the speed limit, and cars are flying off the road or getting away from them. So they're doing what we think we could call that irrational. And why is it irrational? Because there are laws that are written in words that spell out and define what a proper standard of driving would be. And so when they're in violation of that standard property, the standard law there, such as going 60 miles over the speed limit, then that is, it does tie it with the moral, which is the moral is watching a person's behavior in relation to some standard. And either they're in line with that standard, or they're not in line with that standard. So it's either P or not P. But now morality as a definition, it can involve, it has to do with principles concerning the behavior of a person, and then looking at is whether it's good or evil, and or right or wrong. Now, right and wrong is more of a subset of good and evil. So I don't find it appropriate to always say they're exactly synonymous, but it's the good is what is kind of the right is like a subset of a good, and a wrong is a subset of an evil, and those are kind of that way. But I think I might have. Did I get that kind of explained or no? What do you think there?
No, you did. I just think that in a way, propositional logic like attempts to escape semantics at all. So like the law of identity, A equals A, removes all variable terms, even the terms good and bad. Although fundamentally the etymology of like a juxtaposition of terms, what does good and bad really represent? It represents like a comparison, right? The relation between opposites. And so I would say that fundamentally the law of identity gets us to that enlightenment, at least, right? At least being aware of like the juxtaposition of opposites and how we can derive meaning from comparing juxtaposing terms or negation and affirmation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we're talking about basically just an opposite, a dichotomy for okay, we have P or not P. That's the other law, or
Yes.
the or P cannot be not P. So that's the setting of the word good and evil are then set as opposite, because you can go through that with the word evil as a noun. You can have evil or not evil. But then what do you realize? What is not evil? Well, the only other choice for it, a not evil is a good. So good is a not evil, and evil is a not good.
How does the word logic, or I mean like logos, relate to this ability to relate terms? Like, why is the etymology, why did you earlier connect logos? And like, I know that word too, but I don't, where did that come from? And like, why is all of this deriving from that word?
Oh, because basically the thing of the logos is, like I say, we have the thought, we have the word, and we have the speech and reasoning. So what are you trying to do here? You're trying to evaluate, is his reasoning the action of thought? Basically, is what we're talking about there. So we have the action of thought is reasoning, then the thought itself. We just have a thought, and then we can have words to label the various informations of the thought, and then we have, of course, speech is transferring or communication of that. So a part of logos is the reasoning, the fact of like actively looking and seeing, is that P or is it not P? And that's basically what you're doing. You're just comparing every whatever kind of thing. Is it the car or is it not the car? Is it the is it whatever or is it not? That's kind of how you in a sense in your mind is going to be going through there trying to evaluate. That's almost the I think really the bare minimum ground basis to decide, what standard am I trying to look for out here, and does something else meet that standard, or is it the standard?
So, okay, I love this conversation so much, man. But are you, when you said that like the knowledge of good and evil is basically in one way or another, a prerequisite for logical thinking and the laws of logic. Are we basically saying there that like people who are constantly immoral or like immoral to the core don't even have the ability to differentiate between that which is and that which isn't, right? This P
Uh,
and
uh,
not P.
Maybe to some degree, or they just have their bias, and it could be what do they call it, like the cognitive bias, in a sense that it's always, they're like raised up with it. They don't have the education on certain things like this, and so that's a part of where they just don't see
Do you
necessarily
think
the.
do you think this is the type of thing that can be educated?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, have I educated you with this stuff? Am I,
Well, I was fairly aware of these concepts to begin with, but you outlined in particular this nuance of the connection between the word good and a noun, and how thinking about objective terminology can relate to moral implications, like the good and evil, and how we think about nouns and building things in the real world versus adjectives. Like you outlined that nicely. That was a new thought for me. But other than that, a lot of this territory obviously has been covered for me. But I don't like. I do think that you and I probably have an earlier sort of faith or connection to these ideas in earlier in life that just a lot of my peers and people I interact with don't have the privilege, no matter how much they gain an quote unquote education or etc. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I can understand. Uh,
like I don't know how much, I don't know. I don't know if this is the type. This is where it gets me thinking religiously. Like, I don't know if you're religious, but like it seems like there's an element of faith here, right? Which just no matter how much education you throw at a person, you can't lead a horse to water, right? You can lead a horse to water, you can't force them to drink.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to kind of get into religion, I don't personally own a nursing home or orphanage, but there's times where if I can do something to help and have empathy on helping widows and orphans, something like that, then I'll do it. But and that usually throws people off when I say that. Why? 2,000-year-old definition of religion as seen in biblical text, James 1:27. Religion, pure and faultless is this, to help widows and orphans in need while avoiding worldly corruption. So, I then further go to explain that Christianity, Christianity is not really proper to be called a religion. It obscures the fact of what it really is. It is a theocracy government. So,
Yeah, okay. So so you mean religion in a term of like dogmatic thinking, I guess. I'm not married to the idea of Christianity in terms of its dogma, but I just mean that like the spirituality that comes along with I don't know, logical thinking doesn't seem to be like necessarily educational. I'm skeptical. I guess I try to like when you think about the word educate, I just don't know if people need to bring themselves to these ideas basically.
yeah. Well, yeah, that is, I mean, there is, I guess, I mean, it has a lot to do with the bias. It does have a lot to do with sort of the upbringing. It has to do with, somebody's mental development as far as, how they look at the world in a sense. Is it, I mean, is it like this world is all for them, what they can do for them, and they're just, all about them kind of thing. Whereas, anything they do, no matter what they do, as long as it's good for them, it's like it don't matter if somebody else gets hurt. So, I mean, like I said, I mean, there are probably maybe psychological questions there on some of that I may be a little more than I can explain, but I think that'd be
Well,
about the best.
yeah, like I kind of think that there might be a form of like submitting before the logos in the sense that is religious to the degree of like we don't have it all figured out, and like although we need this, you said knowledge of good and evil, perhaps we need something like that to use logic. We also need to be willing to be wrong kind of thing, or like work through our own bias, as you also said. And
Yeah.
that commitment is a practice and like sort of a religious one, it seems.
Yeah, I mean that is a kind of a biblical thing that it talks about I think it's one of Paul's letters. I can't remember where it's at. I had to dig for it to get the reference, but he's talking about the strongholds, I think, in the mind or something, and that's kind of like the biases that people can hold, the strongholds that are maybe the dogmatic thoughts or the just biases that are whatever. That's a part of what I think is somewhere in there in the biblical reference that would kind of indicate that in the mind. Um, uh,
Spot on.
fallacy thinking. So,
Yeah,
irrational
fallacious
thinking.
thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I would think, yeah. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, because you have, and that's where you can also. I mean, there is connections with the good as a noun and understanding good as a noun. It has a standard, or it is the standard. So it's kind of like it is P, and it exists, and it's like something real enough. Now, I mean, we could say a mathematical formula. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we say it's real, it exists, it's something we could write, do whatever. Although some people might say something abstract, or I ain't trying to get into all that. As far as I'm concerned, we're dealing with something, and we have a label for it, we have a word to call it, we have ways to describe it, and a part of that is we can describe it adjectively as good or not good in the adjective sense. So the use of good and evil in the adjective sense is going to do a lot to follow with the initial meaning sort of the noun use of good. And oh, dang it, I want to have just right there on the edge of thought, and then I lose it. Synonyms. One of the best things I tell people is, all right, if you really want to know a lot more about good and evil, and you always set them opposite, because that's just initially they're opposites. Then go through like a thesaurus and like an internet. You can go through internet thesaurus and look at all the things that are synonyms or antonyms. And that's already established in our language as to a lot of these different things that are synonymous with a good adjective or not synonymous, with or synonymous with the opposite of good. And that's even kind of like some people will say, that there's this thing about beauty. Well, beauty is a word that is like saying good looking, or, it has an appearance of good to me. So that's even that would, I think, fall under. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You're bringing in some like aesthetic realism into symbolic abstract thinking. Yeah, it's cool, man. I like all the connections you're making. Listen,
Yeah.
I don't want to depreciate how much this conversation means to me, because you've been here for a while and you've been so patient, and then you entertained me with so much good conversation. But my energy is wavering here, and so I think I am gonna kind of draw the evening to an end. But I followed you,
That's
dog.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
All right.
I'd like
Yeah,
to.
follow
I'd
me.
love to. I'd love to have another conversation anytime. My DMs are open, and yeah, much love, homie. I hope you have a great evening.
I will do. And also just look up sometime John 1:1. In the beginning was the logic, or the logos, which really I think we could
The
directly
word, brother.
translate logos. Yeah, they do use the word, but I think it could be more appropriate that you could say the logic. In the beginning was the logic. But anyways, I'll leave you
Absolutely.
with that. So,
I love it. Amen.
all right.
Amen. God bless, bro. God bless.
All right. Yeah.